After my wife passed away, we had the inheritance meeting. My daughter-in-law smiled coldly. Now that the old woman is gone, you will put the company in my son's name and fend for yourself. I smiled back. But when my lawyer walked into the room, he read the DNA test out loud. My name is Atticus Mercer. I am 68 years old, a former Marine and the owner of Mercer Haulage and Logistics, a $40 million empire built on sweat, diesel, and discipline. Men fear me in the boardroom. Drivers respect me on the road. But in my own home, I became a stranger the moment my wife took her last breath. Before I tell you how I brought my ungrateful daughter-in-law to her knees with a single piece of paper, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you believe respect is earned, not inherited. The rain in Atlanta felt different that Tuesday. It did not feel like cleansing water. It felt like lead. We stood at the edge of the open grave surrounded by $300,000 worth of floral arrangements that my wife Camille would have hated. She was a woman of simple elegance. She preferred wild lilies to these stiff imported roses that smelled like formaldehyde and money. I stood there in my black suit, the one Camille had picked out for our 40th anniversary, just 2 months ago. I could still feel the phantom warmth of her hand on my arm, but my arm was empty. My son Kendrick stood to my left. He looked sharp in his suit, I will give him that. But his shoulders were slumped. He was 32 years old, but he looked like a lost boy waiting for permission to speak. He kept glancing sideways, not at his mother's casket, but at his wife. Courtney. Courtney was a vision of inappropriate grief. She wore a black dress that was tight enough to be a second skin and a hat with a veil that looked more like a fashion statement than a sign of mourning. She was checking her phone. I saw the blue light reflect off her perfectly manicured nails. She was probably checking the likes on the selfie she had posted 10 minutes ago with the caption about losing her beloved second mother. The hypocrisy tasted like bile in my throat. The pastor was speaking about Camille's charity work, about the soup kitchen she funded in downtown Atlanta, about her grace. I tuned him out. I wanted to be alone with my wife one last time. I reached down to pick up the handful of dirt for the ceremonial toss. My hand, usually steady enough to repair a diesel engine or aim a rifle, was trembling. That was when Courtney leaned in. She did not hug me. She did not offer a tissue. She brought her lips close to my ear, smelling of expensive perfume and mints. "You should start moving your things to the guest house tonight, Atticus." I froze. The dirt in my hand felt heavy. I turned to look at her. Her face was hidden behind the veil, but I could see the glint of her eyes. They were dry. There was not a single tear in them. "Excuse me," I whispered back, my voice rough. "The guest house," she repeated louder this time, though still a whisper. "It is plenty big for one person. I have already called the contractors. I need the master suite. The lighting in there is perfect for my beauty live streams. Plus, Kendrick and I need the space. We are the future of this family, after all." I looked at Kendrick. He was busy brushing a speck of dust off Courtney's shoulder. He had heard her. I knew he had heard her. But he said nothing. He just kept his eyes fixed on the fabric of her dress, terrified to meet my gaze. I dropped the dirt onto the casket. The sound was a dull thud that echoed in the hollow of my chest. I did not scream. I did not cause a scene. A Marine does not lose his composure in front of the enemy. And standing there by the fresh grave of the woman who had been my anchor for 4 decades, I realized something terrifying. I was not standing next to family. I was standing next to enemies. The ride back to the estate was silent. The limousine was long and cold. I sat facing the rear, watching the cemetery gates fade into the gray distance. Courtney and Kendrick sat opposite me. Courtney had removed her veil. She was scrolling through Instagram, tapping the screen with a rhythmic, annoying click. Kendrick was staring out the window, looking at everything and nothing. I built this life for them. That was the thought that kept circling in my mind. I started Mercer Haulage with 1 second-hand truck and a toolbox. Camille managed the books on our kitchen table while I drove 18 hours a day. We ate canned beans so Kendrick could go to private school. We sacrificed our youth so he could have a future. And this was the return on our investment. A son who had no spine, and a daughter-in-law who saw my wife's death as a real estate opportunity. When the limo pulled up the long driveway, the rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and black. The house stood on the hill, a sprawling colonial mansion that was supposed to be our legacy. But as the driver opened my door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a white van parked near the front entrance. The logo on the side read, "Smith & Sons Locksmiths." What is this? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. Courtney stepped out of the car, adjusting her sunglasses even though there was no sun. I told you, Atticus. I like to be efficient. I walked up the steps, my cane tapping against the stone. I did not need the cane to walk, but I liked the weight of it. It was a weapon I could carry in plain sight. I pushed open the front door. The hallway, usually pristine and smelling of lemon polish, looked like a war zone. Black trash bags were lined up against the wall. Dozens of them. They were bulging, misshapen, and tied with aggressive knots. I recognized the item poking out of one of the bags. It was the spine of a leather-bound Bible. Camille's Bible. The one she read every morning with her coffee. I stepped forward and ripped the bag open. Clothes spilled out, silk scarves. The knit sweaters she wore in the winter. The dress she wore to Kendrick's graduation. They were thrown in there like garbage. Like rot. Don't make a mess. Courtney sighed, walking past me as if I were the help. The charity truck is coming in an hour. I claimed the tax deduction already. You are throwing away her things, I said. It was not a question. It was a growl. We have not even read the will. We have not even had the reception. It is just stuff, Atticus, she said, waving a hand dismissively. Old people stuff. It smells like lavender and mothballs. I cannot have that scent clinging to my brand. I am launching a new skincare line next month. The vibe needs to be fresh, modern. She walked towards the stairs. I followed her. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a dangerous rhythm for a man my age, but rage is a potent fuel. I reached the top of the stairs and turned towards the master bedroom. The double doors, mahogany with brass handles, were closed. I reached for the handle. It was locked. I tried to turn it again. Locked. The mechanism was stiff new. I turned to Courtney. She was standing at the end of the hallway, a smirk playing on her lips. I told you, she said. Efficient. Open this door, I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm before an artillery strike. No, she said, popping the P of the word. It is my room now. Kendrick's and mine. You have the guest house out back. It is nice, private. You can cough and watch your old westerns as loud as you want without bothering us. I looked at Kendrick. He was standing halfway up the stairs, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. Kendrick, I said, give me the key. He looked at me, then at Courtney. Courtney raised an eyebrow. Just one. It was a silent command, a leash being pulled. Dad, Kendrick said, his voice cracking. Maybe it is for the best. You know Mom is gone. The room, it is too big for you. You will get lonely in there. The guest house is cozy. And Courtney, she has been stressed. She needs the space to work. I looked at my son. I looked for the boy I had taught to fish. I looked for the young man I had taught to drive a stick shift. I looked for the man who had promised to take care of this family. I found none of them. I only saw a husk, a hollow shell filled with fear. This is my house, I said, stepping toward him. My name is on the deed. Actually, Courtney interrupted, checking her nails again. Since you are retired and technically listed as a dependent on the company insurance for tax purposes, and considering your recent episodes of grief, we thought it best to take over the management of the household. For your own good, of course. We would not want you to burn the place down forgetting to turn off the stove. Senility is a tragedy, Atticus. She was gaslighting me. Standing over her mother-in-law's fresh grave, she was already painting me as incompetent, as senile. I gripped my cane. My knuckles turned white. I wanted to smash the new lock. I wanted to tear the door off its hinges. I wanted to throw every single bag of my wife's clothes back into the closet and scream until the windows shattered. But I didn't. I looked at the locksmith who was packing up his tools. He looked ashamed. He knew this was wrong. He looked down at his boots. I looked at the trash bags containing 40 years of my wife's life. And then I looked at Courtney. She was smiling. It was a cold, victorious smile. She thought she had won. She thought she had captured the fortress. She thought I was just a tired, broken old man who would shuffle off to the guest house and die quietly so she could spend my millions. Fine, I said. Courtney blinked. She had expected a fight. She had expected shouting. She wanted a fight so she could record it and show everyone how unstable I was. Fine, she asked. I will stay in the guest house, I said. I will need tonight to sort through Camille's things. Do not let the charity truck take them. If one piece of her clothing leaves this house before I say so, I will burn this entire mansion to the ground with us inside. I said it with such flat, absolute certainty that Courtney's smile faltered for a second. She saw the Marine in my eyes. She saw the man who had survived war. Okay, she said, her voice slightly less confident. You can sort the trash, but be done by tomorrow. I have a yoga instructor coming at 9. I turned around and walked down the stairs. I walked past my son without looking at him. I walked past the trash bags. I walked out the front door and into the humid Atlanta afternoon. I walked to the guest house. It was a small structure originally built for the gardener. It was dusty. It smelled of disuse. I sat down on the single narrow bed. I took a deep breath. The grief hit me, then a tidal wave that bent me double. I buried my face in my hands and I wept for my wife. I wept for the woman who had held my hand when we had nothing. I wept for the memories that were now being treated like garbage, but as the tears dried, something else took their place. A cold, hard resolve. They wanted the master bedroom. They could have it. They wanted to play games. Fine. I had played games where the losers did not just lose money, they lost their lives. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the app that connected to the security cameras. Courtney thought she was smart. She thought changing the physical locks meant she controlled the house. She forgot that I owned the network. I owned the servers. I owned the eyes and ears of this estate. I saw them on the screen. They were in the master bedroom. Courtney was already ripping the sheets off our marital bed, throwing them into the corner. Kendrick was standing by the window looking out toward the guest house. She is throwing away Mom's pillows, Kendrick said. The audio was crisp. I had upgraded the microphones last year. Stop whining, Courtney snapped. We need to order that Italian silk set I saw in Vogue and get the lawyer on the phone. We need to expedite the transfer of the company shares while he is still in shock. We strike while the iron is hot, baby. I watched them on the small screen of my phone. The grief was gone. In its place was a mission. You want to strike, I whispered to the empty room. Okay, let's see who hits harder. I closed the app. I stood up and smoothed out my suit jacket. I was Atticus Mercer, and I was about to go to war. The dining room table was made of solid oak. It had seated 3 generations of Mercers. My father had carved the legs himself. I had refinished the surface with my own hands before I married Camille. Tonight that table did not feel like a place of gathering. It felt like a chopping block. Courtney sat at the head of the table. That was the first insult. For 40 years, that had been my seat. It was the captain's chair where I carved the Thanksgiving turkey and where I signed the contracts that turned my single truck operation into a logistics empire. Now my daughter-in-law sat there. She looked small in the high-backed leather chair, but her presence filled the room like a noxious gas. Kendrick sat to her right, I sat to her left. My grandson Leo sat opposite Courtney playing with his peas. He was the only innocent thing in this room. He was 4 years old and he had my nose. Or at least I told myself he did. The silence was thick. The only sound was the clinking of silverware against fine china. The maid had served roast beef, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. So Atticus Courtney began wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. We need to discuss the future. Now that the funeral is behind us, we can focus on growth. I did not look up from my plate. Growth, I repeated. Yes, growth, she said. She reached for her wine glass. It was a vintage Cabernet I had been saving for my 50th wedding anniversary. She drank it like it was grape juice. Kendrick and I have been looking at the numbers. The trucking business is steady, but it is dinosaur technology. It is dirty. It is slow. The margins are thin. The margins are 18%, I said calmly. That is 5 points higher than the industry average. But it is not sexy, Courtney said. She actually used that word, sexy, to describe a haulage company. We want to pivot. I have a business plan for a luxury lifestyle brand, cosmetics, wellness, an influencer academy. We can use the company's credit line to seed the initial investment. We are thinking of selling 30% of the fleet to liquidating some assets. I put my fork down. The sound was sharp against the porcelain. You want to sell my trucks? I asked. You want to sell the machines that put food on this table so you can sell lipstick on the internet? It is high-end skincare, she corrected. And yes, we need about $5 million to start. Kendrick agrees with me. Don't you, Kenny? I turned my eyes to my son. Kendrick was cutting his meat, back and forth, back and forth. The knife scraped against the plate, but he was not cutting anything. His hands were shaking. It was a subtle tremor, but I saw it. I knew that tremor. I had seen it in young recruits before their first firefight. It was the physical manifestation of fear. "Kendrick," I said, "look at me." He did not look up. He stared at the roast beef as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Kendrick," I said again, sharper this time. He flinched. He dropped his knife. It clattered onto the plate. "Dad," he whispered. "Courtney has a good vision. The world is changing. We need to diversify." He sounded like he was reading a script he had been forced to memorize under duress. I looked back at Courtney. She was smiling. It was the smile of a predator who knows the prey is trapped. "The answer is no," I said. "I built this company from the ground up. I know every driver by name. I know the maintenance schedule of every engine. I will not dismantle my life's work so you can play pretend businesswoman." Courtney's smile did not waver. She expected this. She took another sip of my wine. "I thought you might say that," she said. She leaned forward. Her elbows rested on the table. She looked at Leo. My grandson was oblivious, pushing a pea across his plate with a spoon. "It is a shame, really," she said softly. "Seattle is so beautiful this time of year." My blood ran cold. "Seattle?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "My mother lives there." Kendrick and I were talking. If we cannot find support here in Atlanta, maybe it is time for a fresh start, a new environment for Leo. The schools there are excellent, and it is so far away. A 6-hour flight. We would probably only visit on holidays, maybe every other year. I looked at Leo. He looked up at me and smiled. "Grandpa," he said, "look, I made a mountain." My heart shattered. This was the leverage. This was the weapon. She was not negotiating with spreadsheets. She was holding my grandson hostage. She knew Leo was the only thing keeping me alive after Camille died. She knew that if she took him away to the other side of the country, I would wither and die in this big, empty house alone. I looked at Kendrick. He was drinking water, his hands still trembling. He knew what she was doing. He was letting her use his son as a bargaining chip. The disgust I felt for my own flesh and blood was a bitter poison. I looked at Courtney. She was waiting. Her eyes dared me to challenge her. If I said no, they would leave. I would keep my money, but I would lose my heart. If I said yes, I would lose a piece of my soul, but I would keep the boy close. I was a Marine. I knew about tactical retreats. Sometimes you have to give up ground to lure the enemy into a trap. You have to let them think they have won, so they get careless. So they expose their flanks. I took a deep breath. I picked up my wine glass. $5 million is too much, I said. My voice was steady. It would cripple our cash flow. Courtney's eyes narrowed, but I continued. I can authorize $2 million as a seed round, but I want oversight. I want to see the quarterly reports. Courtney's eyes lit up. It was the greed. It shone brighter than the chandelier above us. $2 million, she said, testing the word. It is that or nothing, I said. And you stay in Atlanta. Leo stays in his school. Courtney looked at Kendrick. She nodded. We can work with $2 million, she said. For now. She raised her glass. To family, she said. I did not raise my glass. I watched her drink. $2 million was a lot of money, but it was a cheap price to pay for what I needed. I needed time. I needed them to stay close so I could watch them, so I could find the cracks in their armor. Courtney thought she had won a fortune. She did not know she had just signed her own warrant. I watched Kendrick try to eat his dinner. He looked like he was choking. Good, I thought. Choke on it. I looked at Leo. He was eating his peas one by one. I would protect him, no matter the cost. Even if I had to burn down everything around him to do it. 1 step back, 3 steps forward, past the salt, I said. The war had officially begun. The next morning I drove to the Mercer Haulage Depot. This place was my sanctuary. It was 40 acres of asphalt and steel located in an industrial park south of the city. I usually felt a sense of calm the moment I drove through the gates. I loved the smell of diesel fuel. I loved the sound of air brakes hissing. I loved the sight of my fleet lined up like soldiers ready for deployment. But today, as I turned the corner, my heart stopped beating in my chest. I slammed on the brakes of my sedan. I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. Parked in the front row was Big Bertha. She was a Peterbilt 579, and she was the pride of my fleet. I had bought her cash 5 years ago. She was a beast of a machine painted a deep midnight blue with chrome accents that shone like silver under the Georgia sun. But Big Bertha was gone. In her place was a monstrosity. Someone had wrapped the entire cab of the truck in vinyl. It was not blue anymore. It was pink. A bright, offensive bubblegum pink that hurt my eyes. On the side of the door where the Mercer Haulage logo used to be, there was a picture of a woman's face. She was winking. Next to her in looping gold letters were the words Courtney's Glow Up Cosmetics. Beneath that it said, Real Beauty for Real Queens. I felt a bile rise in my throat. They had turned my 18-wheeler into a moving billboard for face cream. This was a machine designed to haul 40 tons of steel across state lines. It was a symbol of American strength, and they had dressed it up like a toy. I stepped out of my car. The humid air hit me, but I barely felt it. I walked toward the truck. I reached out and touched the pink vinyl. It felt like plastic. It felt cheap. I peeled back a corner of it with my fingernail and saw the beautiful blue paint underneath. It was like seeing a scar covered by a bandage. Hey, you cannot touch that. I turned around. A young man was walking toward me. He was wearing skinny jeans and a t-shirt that was 2 sizes too big. He was holding an iPad. He did not look like a truck driver. He looked like he had never changed a tire in his life. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice was low. "I am the brand integration manager," the boy said. He looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and pity. "We are doing a photo shoot for the social media launch. You need to step away from the vehicle. This is private property." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Private property," I repeated. "Son, do you know who I am?" The boy looked at his iPad, then back at me. He shrugged. "I assume you are one of the old drivers. Look, if you are looking for the break room, it moved to the back." We turned the front lounge into a content creation studio. "Now please move your car. You are blocking the light." I did not move. I stared at him until he took a step back. "I am Atticus Mercer," I said. "I own this asphalt you are standing on. I own that truck you defaced. And I own the paycheck you are hoping to collect on Friday." The boy's face went pale. "Oh," he stammered. "I didn't know. Courtney said that... Mrs. Mercer said that the previous owner was retired." Previous owner. The words hung in the air like smoke. I walked past him. I walked toward the main office building. The glass doors slid open and I was hit with a smell that did not belong here. It smelled of vanilla and lavender. The reception desk, which had been manned for 20 years by Mrs. Higgins, was empty. Mrs. Higgins was a 60-year-old black woman who knew every driver's birthday and every route by heart. In her place sat a young woman with bright green hair, chewing gum, and typing on her phone. "Where is Mrs. Higgins?" I asked. The girl did not look up. "Who?" "The woman who sat in that chair for 2 decades, I said. "Oh, the old lady." The girl popped a bubble. "Courtney let her go yesterday, said she didn't fit the new aesthetic. We are going paperless, you know." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Mrs. Higgins was a widow. She needed this job. She was family. I walked past the reception desk, ignoring the girl's protests. I went straight to the break room. This was where the heart of the company lived. This was where the drivers drank coffee, complained about the traffic, and shared stories about their families. I pushed open the door. The room was thick with tension. About 10 of my oldest drivers were sitting around the plastic tables. These were men I had known for years, men with calloused hands and gray in their beards, men who had driven through blizzards and hurricanes to get the job done. When I walked in, the conversation stopped dead. They looked at me. For the first time in 30 years, I did not see respect in their eyes. I saw betrayal. Deacon was the first to speak. He was a giant of a man, a former linebacker who had been with me since the beginning. He stood up slowly. "So it is true, then," Deacon said. His voice was deep and rumbling like an idling engine. "You are selling us out, Atticus." I walked further into the room. "I did not sell anything, Deacon." "Then what is that pink abomination in the parking lot?" Deacon asked, pointing a thick finger toward the window. "And why did I get a memo this morning saying my overtime is being cut so we can fund a synergy retreat?" "What in the hell is a synergy retreat, Atticus? I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids in college. I cannot pay the bank with synergy." I looked around the room. I saw fear in their faces. These men were the backbone of America. They were tough. But they were scared. They were scared of being obsolete. They were scared of the young people in the front office who looked at them like dinosaurs. "It is just a temporary measure," I said. The words tasted like ash. We are trying to expand the business capital. Don't lie to us, Atticus, another driver named Miller, said. He threw a piece of paper on the table. It was a termination notice. They fired Mrs. Higgins. They fired the night mechanic. They brought in some kid who says we need to install tracking apps on our personal phones so they can monitor our wellness. Wellness. I have been driving for 40 years. My wellness is none of their business. I looked at the termination notice. It was signed by Kendrick Mercer, CEO. I felt shame. Hot burning shame. I had let this happen. I had been so consumed by my own grief and my own battle at home that I had left the gates unguarded. I had let the wolves into the sheepfold. Listen to me, I said. I raised my voice so everyone could hear. I know things look bad. I know you are angry. You have every right to be angry. Then tell us it is not true, Deacon said. Tell us you are taking back the wheel. Tell us you are going to scrape that pink nonsense off Big Bertha and give Mrs. Higgins her job back. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to say yes. I wanted to march into Kendrick's office and fire everyone. I wanted to tear down the vanilla-scented diffusers and bring back the smell of coffee and grease. But I remembered the plan. 1 step back, 3 steps forward. If I moved too fast now, Courtney would take Leo and leave. She would claim I was incompetent. She would destroy everything. I needed more evidence. I needed to let them hang themselves with their own rope. I cannot do that today, I said softly. The room went silent. The disappointment was heavier than gravity. But I continued looking Deacon in the eye. I am asking you to trust me, not as your boss, but as the man who stood beside you when your house burned down, as the man who paid for your daughter's surgery when the insurance denied it. I am asking you to hold the line. For how long? Deacon asked. Just a little longer, I said. Do not quit. Do not strike. Just drive the trucks. Ignore the apps. Ignore the pink vinyl. Just do your jobs. I am working on something. But I need you to stay in the fight. Deacon looked at me for a long time. He was searching for the truth in my eyes. He was looking for the Atticus he knew. Finally, he nodded. A small, barely perceptible nod. All right, Atticus, he said. We will hold the line, but do not make us wait too long. A man can only take so much humiliation. I nodded back. I turned and walked out of the break room. My heart was breaking, but my resolve was hardening into steel. I marched down the hallway to the executive suite. My name used to be on the door. Now it said Kendrick Mercer. I opened the door without knocking. Kendrick was sitting behind my desk. He was not working. He was looking at samples of packaging for the cosmetic line. The desk was covered in jars and tubes. Dad, he said, jumping up. You startled me. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised. He looked soft. He looked like a man who had forgotten where he came from. Mrs. Higgins, I said. Why? Kendrick sighed. He ran a hand through his hair. Courtney thought. We thought that she was redundant. We need people who are tech-savvy, Dad. We need a younger energy. She is a widow, Kendrick, I said. She has been loyal to us for 20 years. Loyalty used to mean something in this family. It is business, Dad, Kendrick said, his voice whining. We have to be ruthless to survive. The margins on the trucking side are stagnant. The cosmetic line is going to explode. Courtney has projections that show a 300% return. Projections. I spat the word out. You fired a woman who held you when you were a baby for projections. You painted my best truck pink for projections. It is called branding, Dad, Kendrick said defensively. You just don't get it. The world has moved on. You are stuck in the past. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the yard. I saw Deacon walking toward his truck. He looked tired. He looked defeated. Maybe I am stuck in the past, I said quietly. Or maybe you are just lost in the future. I turned back to Kendrick. I want to see the books, I said. Kendrick froze. The books. Yes, I said. The accounts. If we are pivoting as you say, I want to see the capital flow. I want to see where the $2 million I authorized is going. Kendrick shifted his weight. He looked nervous. He started shuffling the jars of cream on his desk. Well, he said, the accountant is still migrating the data to the new cloud system. It might take a few days to generate a report. I did not blink. I smelled a lie. It smelled worse than the vanilla air freshener. You have 24 hours, I said. I want to see every invoice, every receipt, every consulting fee. Kendrick nodded quickly. Sure, Dad. Of course. Tomorrow. I walked toward the door. I stopped with my hand on the knob. "And Kendrick," I said, "yes, Dad. If you ever disrespect the men who drive those trucks again, I will not fire you. I will let them handle you. And Deacon has a very heavy hand." I walked out. I left my son standing alone in an office that did not belong to him, surrounded by plastic jars of hope and lies. I walked back to my car. I took out my phone. I opened the audio recording app. I had recorded the entire conversation with the brand manager. I had recorded the conversation with the drivers, and I had recorded Kendrick's hesitation about the books. I sat in my car and watched the pink truck pull out of the lot. It looked ridiculous. It looked like a clown car. But as I watched it disappear down the highway, I made a vow. I would scrape that pink vinyl off with my own fingernails if I had to. I would bring Mrs. Higgins back. I would restore the honor of this company. But first I had to find the money. Kendrick was hiding something. The nervous twitch in his eye told me everything. He was not just incompetent. He was stealing. And he was doing it for her. I started my engine. The sound was a low growl. "You want to play business, son?" I whispered. "Let me show you how a hostile takeover really works." The basement did not have windows. It had high rectangular vents near the ceiling that let in slivers of light and the sound of tires on the gravel driveway above. For 30 days, this concrete box had been my home. My world had shrunk from a 6-bedroom mansion to a 400-square-foot room that smelled of damp earth and old vintages of Bordeaux that I no longer had the heart to drink. I slept on a folding cot. I had a perfectly good mattress in the guest room upstairs, but Courtney said she needed that room for her yoga studio. She said the feng shui in the basement was better for grounding energy. I knew what she meant. She meant she wanted me underground. She meant she wanted me buried before I was even dead. It was a Friday night. The floorboards above my head were vibrating. The bass from the stereo system thumped against my skull like a second heartbeat. Courtney was hosting what she called a networking mixer. In reality, it was a gathering of vultures. I could hear their footsteps. I could hear the clinking of glass. I could hear the shrill laughter that sounded like breaking china. I was thirsty. I had run out of water hours ago, and the tap in the basement bathroom dispensed a rusty brown liquid that tasted of iron pipes. I had to go upstairs. I put on my robe. It was an old silk robe Camille had bought me in Paris 20 years ago. It was frayed at the cuffs, but it was clean. I walked up the narrow wooden stairs. My cane clicked against the steps. When I opened the door to the kitchen, I was hit by a wall of noise and the smell of expensive cologne and cheap ambition. The kitchen was crowded. There were people I did not know leaning against my granite countertops. They were young, they were beautiful, and they were drunk. The room went quiet when I entered. It was the kind of silence that happens when an unwanted guest crashes a private moment. A man in a linen suit was leaning against the refrigerator. He looked me up and down. He smirked. "Hey, Courtney," he shouted over the music. "I think your gardener got lost." Laughter rippled through the room. It was cruel laughter. Courtney appeared from the living room. She was wearing a gold dress that shimmered under the recessed lighting. She held a champagne flute. "Oh, Atticus," she said. Her voice was dripping with fake sweetness. "I didn't know you were still awake. We were just celebrating. My first skincare tutorial hit 10,000 views." "That is nice," I said. "I just need some water." I walked to the sink. The crowd parted for me, but not out of respect. They moved away like I was contagious, like old age was a disease they could catch if they stood too close. I filled a glass with filtered water. My hand was steady. I refused to let them see me shake. As I turned to leave, the man in the linen suit stepped in front of me. He held out a half-smoked cigar. "Hey, Pops," he said. "Since you are up, be a sport and empty this ashtray. The maid is busy." He pointed to a crystal bowl on the counter. It was not an ashtray. It was a bowl Camille had received as a wedding gift. It was Waterford crystal, and they were using it for ash. I looked at the man. I looked at the cigar. I could have broken his wrist in 3 places before he even blinked. The training never leaves you. The muscle memory was twitching in my forearm. But I looked at Courtney. She was watching me. Her eyes were hard. She was waiting for me to snap. She was waiting for the angry black man to emerge so she could call the police and have me committed. I took a breath. I forced my shoulders to relax. I picked up the bowl. I walked to the trash compactor. I dumped the ash. I rinsed the bowl. I placed it back on the counter. "There you go," I said softly. The man laughed. "Good boy," he said. I walked back to the basement door. I closed it behind me. The music was muffled again, but the rage in my chest was screaming. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was a servant in my own empire. Good, let them think that. I sat down at the small metal desk I had set up in the corner of the basement. I turned on the desk lamp. The harsh white light illuminated my workspace. It did not look like the desk of a retired old man. It looked like the command center of a forward operating base. For the past 3 weeks I had been busy. While they slept, while they partied, while they spent my money, I had been working. I had ordered equipment online using a prepaid debit card I bought at the grocery store. High-gain microphones, pinhole cameras, GPS trackers. I was a logistics man. I knew how to track cargo. I knew how to monitor assets. And right now my family was the cargo and they were heading off a cliff. I put on my headphones. They were noise-canceling. The thumping bass from upstairs disappeared. The world narrowed down to the audio feed from the receiver on the desk. I had planted bugs in the living room inside the chandelier. I had planted a bug in Kendrick's office under the desk. And I had planted a bug in Courtney's car behind the rearview mirror. I switched channels. Channel 1 was the living room. Just noise. Drunk people talking about cryptocurrency and influencers. Useless. I switched to Channel 2. The office. It was quiet. Then I heard the door click shut. The sound of the lock turning. The music was faint in the background. Someone was in the office. I adjusted the gain on the microphone. I heard the rustle of silk. Courtney. Then I heard the sound of a phone dialing. I leaned forward. I picked up a pen. I opened my notebook. Hello? Courtney's voice was clear. It sounded different than when she spoke to me. It wasn't shrill. It was low. Intimate. Hey, baby, she said. No, I cannot talk long. The party is still going. Kendrick is passed out on the sofa. Lightweight. I wrote down the time. 11:42 p.m. She laughed. It was a throaty, genuine laugh. I have never heard her laugh like that with my son. Yes, I know, she said. The launch is going well. We are going to bleed this company dry within 6 months. The old man is clueless. He is downstairs right now, probably knitting or whatever old people do. He emptied an ashtray for Chad earlier. It was pathetic. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I gripped the pen. The ink bled into the paper. I heard the sound of liquid being poured. She was drinking my scotch. The 25-year-old single malt I kept in the bottom drawer. Listen, Grant, she said. Grant. I wrote the name down. Grant. Who was Grant? We need to be careful, she said. Kendrick is stupid, but he is getting clingy. He keeps asking why I am spending so much time at the tennis club. You need to cool it with the text messages. Tennis club. I underlined it. I heard a pause. Then her voice changed. It became softer. I saw him today, she said. He is getting so big. She wasn't talking about Kendrick. I know she whispered. I know we agreed not to talk about it. But Grant, you should see him. The way he holds his spoon. The way he tilts his head when he is thinking. It is scary. My heart started to pound. I pressed the headphones tighter against my ears. He does not look like Kendrick, she said. Every day he looks less like Kendrick. He is starting to get your jawline and your temper. Today he threw a toy truck because it wasn't the right color. It was adorable. He is a little fighter just like his real daddy. The world stopped. The air in the basement vanished. I could not breathe. Real daddy. I stared at the spinning reel of the audio recorder on my screen. The waveform spiked as she laughed again. Don't worry, she said. The old man loves him. He thinks the sun rises and sets on that boy. As long as he thinks Leo is a Mercer, we are safe. The DNA is the ultimate alibi, or lack thereof, or lack. Nobody questions a grandmother's love even if she is dead, and nobody questions a grieving grandfather. She hung up. I heard the sound of the glass being set down on the desk. I heard her hum a little tune as she unlocked the door and left the office. Silence returned to the headphones. I took the headphones off. My hands were shaking. But this time it was not from rage. It was from shock. Leo. My grandson. The boy I had taught to walk. The boy who sat on my knee and steered the steering wheel of my truck. The boy who was the only reason I had not burned this house to the ground. He was not mine. He was not Kendrick's. He belonged to Grant. Whoever the hell Grant was. I looked at the notebook. The name Grant stared back at me. I stood up. I walked to the corner of the room where I kept my old footlocker from the Marines. I opened it. Inside was my dress blues uniform folded perfectly, my medals, and a bottle of whiskey I had been saving for a special occasion. I opened the bottle. I did not use a glass. I took a long pull. The burn was good. It reminded me I was still alive. I looked up at the ceiling. The party was still going on. They were dancing on my floor. They were drinking my wine. And they were raising a cuckoo bird in my nest. They thought they had broken me by putting me in the basement. They thought they had humiliated me by making me a servant. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had given me the one thing a soldier needs most: intel. I wiped my mouth. I closed the notebook. "You want a war, Courtney?" I whispered to the empty room. "You just declared one, and you have no idea what kind of enemy you just woke up." I turned off the light. I sat in the darkness, listening to the bass thumping above. It sounded like a drum roll. A drum roll for an execution. Tomorrow I would find Grant. Tomorrow I would find the truth. And then I would bring the whole house down. The hospital smell never changes. It is a cocktail of rubbing alcohol, iodine, and fear. It does not matter if you are in a field tent in the Mekong Delta or a private VIP suite in Atlanta. The smell triggers the same instinct in a soldier. It tells you to tighten your boots and check your perimeter. I stood in the corner of the emergency room. My hands were clasped behind my back. I was in what we used to call the parade rest position. It was the only way I could keep myself from shaking. Leo had fallen from the jungle gym at his private preschool. It was a nasty fall, a compound fracture of the ulna. There was blood, too much blood for a boy that size. Courtney was putting on a performance by the bedside. She was sobbing loud theatrical tears that seemed designed for an audience. She held Leo's uninjured hand and wailed about suing the school board, suing the playground manufacturer, suing the teacher who was on duty. Kendrick stood by the window. He looked pale. He looked like he was the one who needed medical attention. He could not stand the sight of blood. He never could. When he was 10, he cut his foot on a piece of glass at the beach, and I had to carry him a mile to the car because he fainted dead away. The doctor came in. He was a young man with tired eyes. "We need to set the bone," he said. "He has lost some fluids, so we are going to start a transfusion just to be safe before we go into surgery. We have already typed his blood." I stepped forward. The logistics of the situation took over my brain. It was a coping mechanism. Focus on the data, ignore the pain. "What is his type?" I asked. The doctor looked at his clipboard. "B positive," he said. "We have plenty in stock." "Do not worry. B positive." The words hung in the air like smoke from a grenade. I felt the room tilt. The floor seemed to slide out from under my polished dress shoes. "Are you sure?" I asked. My voice sounded strange. It sounded like it was coming from underwater. The doctor looked at me. He looked annoyed. "Of course I'm sure. We ran the test twice. It is standard procedure." I looked at Kendrick. "My son was type O positive. I knew this because I was O positive. I had donated blood for him when he had his appendix removed at age 12. O is a recessive blood type. If I am O and his mother was O, then Kendrick had to be O. There is no other mathematical possibility." I looked at Courtney. When I added her to the company health insurance plan 5 years ago, I saw her medical file. It was part of the executive physical. Courtney was type A positive. I did the biology in my head. It was simple Mendelian genetics, high school science. A type O father and a type A mother can produce a type O child. They can produce a type A child. They cannot produce a type B child. To get a type B child, one of the parents must carry the B gene. I looked at Leo. He was sedated now, his small chest rising and falling. He had the same curly hair as Kendrick. He had the same smile. But blood does not lie. Blood is the only truth in a world of deception. I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Atticus Courtney snapped. "Why are you harassing the doctor? Let him do his job. You are stressing me out." I looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the smeared mascara and the designer blouse, I saw a stranger. I saw a thief. "I am just concerned," I said. My voice was flat. I stepped back into the shadows of the corner. My mind began to race. It was like a computer rebooting, shifting from passive mode to combat mode. If Leo was not Kendrick's son, then who was he? And more importantly, who knew? Did Kendrick know? I looked at my son. He was chewing his fingernails, staring blankly at the floor. No, he did not know. He was too weak to carry a secret that heavy. He genuinely believed that boy was his. That was why he let Courtney walk all over him. He was doing it for his family. But there was no family. It was a lie. A 4-year-old lie wrapped in expensive clothes and private schooling. We stayed at the hospital for 6 hours. I did not say another word. I watched. I listened. I became a ghost in the room. When we finally got back to the estate, it was past midnight. The house was dark. Kendrick carried a sleeping Leo up the stairs. Courtney followed, complaining about her migraine and how the hospital lighting was bad for her complexion. I waited in the kitchen. I waited until the lights in the master bedroom went out. I waited until the house settled into its nightly rhythm of creaks and groans. Then I went to work. I went to the pantry and found a box of Ziploc bags. I took a pair of latex gloves from the cleaning supply cabinet. I put them on. The snap of the latex against my wrist felt like locking and loading a weapon. I was not a grandfather anymore. I was a recon Marine, and I was crossing into enemy territory. I moved up the stairs. My cane was left downstairs. I did not need it. I moved on the balls of my feet, silent as a shadow. I reached the master bedroom door. It was locked, of course. But the locksmith they had hired was cheap, and I had keys to every interior door in this house stored in my safe. I slid the master key into the lock. I turned it slowly, timing the click with the hum of the central air conditioning so the sound would be masked. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of stale air and Courtney's perfume. I could hear Kendrick snoring softly. Courtney was breathing deeply, a rhythmic sound of deep sleep. I crept into the room. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I navigated the furniture by memory. I reached the bathroom door. It was ajar. I slipped inside and closed it almost all the way, leaving just a crack for light. I turned on the small flashlight I had brought with me. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the marble vanity. There were 2 toothbrushes in the holder. One was pink, one was blue. I picked up the blue one, Kendrick's. I looked at the bristles. They were worn. Good. That meant plenty of DNA. Epithelial cells from the cheek. White blood cells. The building blocks of identity. I placed the toothbrush into the first Ziploc bag. I sealed it. I wrote K on the bag with a permanent marker. 1 target acquired, 1 to go. I left the bathroom. I crossed the bedroom again. I stopped at the foot of the bed. I looked at the shapes of my son and his wife under the expensive duvet. For a moment I felt a surge of rage so powerful I almost lost my discipline. I wanted to turn on the lights. I wanted to drag Courtney out of bed by her hair and demand the truth. I wanted to shake Kendrick until he woke up from his pathetic slumber. But I held it back. Rage is a fire. If you let it burn wild, it destroys you. If you control it, it powers the engine. I slipped out of the room and locked the door behind me. I walked down the hall to Leo's room. This was the hardest part. The door was open. A nightlight shaped like a rocket ship cast a soft blue glow on the room. Leo was asleep in his bed, his arm in a fresh white cast resting on a pillow. He looked like an angel. He really did. He had my wife's chin, or so I had thought. Now I realized I had been seeing what I wanted to see. We project our love onto children. We paint them with our own features because we are desperate for immortality. I walked to the bedside. I looked down at the boy. He was innocent. He was a victim in this just as much as Kendrick, maybe more. He was living a lie he did not create. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I brushed it away angrily. I needed hair, but not cut hair. I needed hair with the follicle attached, the root. That is where the DNA lives. I looked at his pillow. There were a few loose strands, but I could not risk them being contamination from someone else. I saw his hairbrush on the dresser. I picked it up. It was full of curly, dark hair. I used tweezers to pull a clump of hair from the bristles. I inspected it under the flashlight. Yes, I could see the tiny white bulbs at the ends of the shafts. I put the hair into the second Ziploc bag. I sealed it. I wrote L on the bag. Target acquired, mission complete. I put the hairbrush back exactly where I found it. I adjusted the angle so it matched the dust outline on the dresser. Never leave a trace. I walked out of the room. I went back downstairs to the basement. I sat at my desk. I placed the 2 plastic bags in front of me. They looked like nothing, just trash. A used toothbrush and a clump of hair, but they were heavier than lead. They were the keys to the kingdom, or the bomb that would destroy it. I took out a large manila envelope. I put the bags inside. I included a check for $2,000 made out to the private genetic lab in town. I had already filled out the paperwork using an alias. I did not want the name Mercer leaking out before I was ready. I sealed the envelope. I stamped it. I sat back in my chair. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me cold and exhausted. I thought about the blood type again. B positive. If Courtney was A and Kendrick was O, the father had to be B or AB. I closed my eyes. I tried to think of the men Courtney knew, her friends, her ex-boyfriends. The list was long. She was a social climber. She had used men like rungs on a ladder. Then I remembered the voice on the tape, the phone call I had intercepted. Grant. She had said Grant. She had said the boy was getting his jawline. I opened my laptop. I typed the name Grant into the search bar along with Courtney's maiden name and the city of Seattle. Nothing. I tried Grant and Atlanta. Hundreds of results. Useless. I needed to know who he was. I needed to know his blood type. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow was Saturday. Courtney played tennis every Saturday morning. She claimed it was for fitness, but she always came back smelling of expensive cologne, not sweat. I picked up the envelope. I would mail this in the morning, but while the scientists were looking at the microscope, I would be doing my own field work. I was going to the tennis club. I was going to find this Grant. And when I found him, I was going to find out what kind of blood ran in his veins. I turned off the desk lamp. The basement plunged into darkness. Upstairs, my family slept. They were dreaming of yachts and penthouses. They were dreaming of spending my money. Let them dream, because when the sun rose, I was going to turn their dream into a nightmare. I touched the envelope one last time. Be positive, I whispered. Be positive, Atticus. Be positive that you are doing the right thing. I lay down on the cot. I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling and counted the seconds until dawn. The hunter was awake, and the hunt had just begun. The sign on the gate said Piedmont Driving Club members only. It was a world of manicured lawns, white gazebos, and people who thought owning a yacht was a personality trait. I had been a member for 15 years only because Camille insisted it was good for business networking. I hated the place. It smelled of old money and exclusion. But today, it was the perfect hunting ground. I sat in my car in the far corner of the parking lot. I was not driving my usual sedan. I had rented a gray Ford Taurus, the kind of car that blends into the pavement. To the people at this club, a car like this was invisible. The person driving it was just a servant or a delivery man. Invisibility was my greatest asset. I adjusted the brim of my baseball cap. I had a pair of high-powered binoculars resting on the dashboard. They were military-grade leftovers from a supply contract I had fulfilled years ago. Through the lenses, I could see the clay tennis courts perfectly. Courtney was on court 3. She was wearing a white tennis skirt that was too short and a visor that cost more than my first truck. She was not playing tennis. She was standing at the net talking to a man. I adjusted the focus dial. The man swam into sharp relief. He was tall. He had the kind of build that comes from hours in the gym, not hours of hard labor. He had blonde hair swept back with too much product and a tan that looked artificial. He was wearing a tight polo shirt with the club logo on the chest. Grant. It had to be him. I watched their body language. It was not the body language of a student and a coach. Courtney was leaning in close. Her hand was resting on his forearm. It was a possessive touch, a familiar touch. Grant did not look happy. He was looking around, scanning the perimeter. He looked like a man who owed money. He pulled his arm away from Courtney and gestured aggressively with his tennis racket. I picked up my long-range directional microphone. It was a parabolic dish I had bought online. I pointed it through the crack in my window, aiming it directly at court 3. The sound was fuzzy at first, filled with the thwack of balls and the polite applause of spectators. Then I dialed it in. "You said today, Courtney." Grant's voice came through the headphones, tinny but clear. "I am trying, Grant." Courtney sounded desperate. Her voice was a hiss. "The old man is watching the accounts like a hawk. He is senile, but he is paranoid. I cannot just withdraw 50 grand without triggering an alert." "I need the money, Courtney." Grant slammed the racket against his palm. "The sharks are circling. If I do not pay the bookie by Monday, they are going to break my legs. And if my legs are broken, I cannot teach. And if I cannot teach, I cannot pay rent. That is not my problem, Courtney snapped. It is your problem. Grant leaned over the net, his face inches from hers. Because if I go down, I am taking you with me. I will drive straight to that big, ugly mansion of yours, and I will introduce myself to Kendrick. I will tell him exactly how we met. I will tell him about the nights at the motel while he was away on business trips. Courtney looked terrified. She grabbed his arm again. Shh, keep your voice down. People are watching. I don't care who is watching, Grant said. I want what is mine. I want to see my son Courtney. There it was. The confirmation. My hand gripped the steering wheel. I felt a surge of adrenaline that made my vision sharpen. You cannot see him, Courtney whispered. It is too risky. Leo thinks Kendrick is his father. If you show up, you will confuse him. You will ruin everything. I don't care about ruining your little fantasy life, Grant said. He is my blood, and right now, he is my golden ticket. You have 24 hours, Courtney. Get me the cash or I burn your house down. They stopped talking as a group of women in white dresses walked past. Courtney put on a fake smile and waved. Grant turned away, pretending to check the strings on his racket. I lowered the binoculars. I had heard enough, but I needed more than audio. Audio could be dismissed as doctored. I needed video. I needed to catch them in the act of conspiracy. They were leaving the court. They did not head toward the clubhouse where the locker rooms were. They walked toward the side exit that led to the underground parking garage. I started the engine of the Taurus. I waited for them to disappear down the ramp, then I followed. The parking garage was dimly lit. It smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. I drove slowly, my lights off, letting the ambient light guide me. I saw them. They were standing next to Courtney's white Range Rover. I pulled into a spot 3 rows back behind a concrete pillar. I grabbed my camera. It was a digital SLR with a telephoto lens. I kept the engine running just in case. I aimed the lens. Grant had Courtney pinned against the car. It was not romantic. It was threatening. He had one hand on the roof of the car, trapping her. I snapped a photo. The shutter was silent. Courtney was crying now. I could see the mascara running down her cheeks. She opened her purse. She pulled out a thick envelope. Here, she said. I zoomed in. I could read her lips. This is all I have. It is $5,000. It is my jewelry money. Grant snatched the envelope. He opened it and thumbed through the bills. He sneered. $5,000, he said. This is a joke. This covers the interest, Courtney. It is all I can get right now, Courtney pleaded. Please, Grant, give me more time. Once Atticus signs over the company shares, I will have access to millions. I will buy you a house. I will buy you a gym. Just wait. Grant laughed. He stuffed the envelope into his pocket. I am done waiting, he said. He reached out and grabbed her chin, squeezing it hard, her face distorted in pain. I snapped another photo. This was assault. This was perfect. You have until the inheritance meeting, Grant said. If I do not see a check with 6 zeros on it, I am going to ask for a DNA test myself, and I will petition the court for custody. Imagine that, Courtney. A tennis pro with a gambling problem raising the heir to the Mercer fortune. The judge might just give him to me if he finds out his mother is a fraud. He let go of her face. He turned and walked toward a beat-up Honda Civic parked in the corner. Courtney slid down the side of her car. She buried her face in her hands. I lowered the camera. I sat there in the dark watching the woman who had made my life a living hell. She looked small. She looked pathetic. But I did not feel sorry for her. She had brought a wolf into the fold, and now she was surprised that it wanted to eat. I looked at the photos on the small screen of my camera. Grant's face was clear, his aggression was clear, and the transaction of money was clear. I had identified the enemy. Grant was not a mastermind. He was a low-level grifter, a parasite. He was desperate and he was greedy. Desperate men are dangerous because they are unpredictable, but greedy men are easy to manipulate because they always follow the money. Grant did not love Leo. He did not want to be a father. He wanted a payout. He viewed my grandson as a winning lottery ticket that he was waiting to cash. This was good news. It meant Grant could be bought, or better yet, he could be used. I waited until Grant drove away in his noisy Honda. I waited until Courtney composed herself, fixed her makeup in the rearview mirror, and drove off in her luxury SUV. Then I drove out of the garage. The sunlight outside felt blinding after the darkness of the underground. I drove straight to the office of a private investigator I had used for background checks on employees. His name was Russo. He was expensive, but he was discreet. I handed him the memory card with the photos. I need everything on this man, I told Russo. His full name, his address, his debts, who his bookie is, what he eats for breakfast. Russo looked at the photo of Grant. He looks like trouble, Russo said. He is, I said. He is the kind of trouble that solves itself if you give it enough rope. I want you to find his weak spot, I said. Every man has one. For some it is women. For some it is drugs. For this guy, I think it is gambling. Find out who owns his debt. Why, Russo asked. Because I said standing up and buttoning my jacket. I might want to buy it. I left Russo's office and got back into my rental car. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway and parked the Taurus behind the guest house where nobody would notice it. I walked into the main house. Courtney was in the living room watching TV. She had changed into yoga pants and a sweatshirt. She looked relaxed. The tears were gone. The fear was hidden behind a mask of indifference. "Hey, Atticus," she said, not looking away from the screen. "Did you enjoy your walk?" "It was educational," I said. I walked past her. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I looked at my reflection in the window. I looked tired. The circles under my eyes were dark, but there was a spark in my eyes that had not been there for months. I had the audio, I had the photos, and soon I would have the DNA. The pieces were falling into place. Grant wanted to be part of the family. He wanted to claim his son. I smiled at my reflection. "Be careful what you wish for, Grant," I whispered. "Because in the Mercer family we have a tradition. We take out the trash." I went down to the basement. I took out the dossier I had started on Grant. I taped the photo of him grabbing Courtney's face to the wall. Target acquired. Now all I had to do was wait for the lab results, and then I would set the table for the final feast, and Grant was going to be the main course. The coffee shop was a small brick building tucked away on a side street in Midtown Atlanta. It was the kind of place that smelled of roasted beans and old books, a place where people went to write screenplays or break up with their lovers. I chose it because it was dark, and because nobody from the trucking industry would ever set foot in here. It was raining again. The weather seemed to be conspiring with my mood. The water streaked down the large plate glass window, distorting the world outside into a blur of gray and green. I sat in a booth in the back corner. My back was to the wall. I always sat with my back to the wall. It was a habit I picked up in the Corps and never lost. You cannot get stabbed in the back if there is brick behind you. Lydia Stone walked in at 10 o'clock exactly. Lydia was 45 years old, a black woman with eyes that could cut glass and a mind sharper than a razor. She had been my personal attorney for 15 years. She had helped me navigate lawsuits, union negotiations, and the complex tax laws of inheritance. I had seen her stare down federal prosecutors without blinking. But today Lydia looked tired. She shook her umbrella at the door and scanned the room. When she saw me, she did not smile. That was the first bad sign. Lydia always smiled. She always had a joke about how I needed to retire and take up golf. She walked over to the table and sat down. She placed a leather briefcase on the seat beside her. Then she placed a large yellow envelope on the table. It sat there between us, a standard 9 by 12 manila envelope, the kind you can buy at any office supply store for 10 cents. It looked innocuous. It looked boring, but I knew better. That envelope was not made of paper. It was made of dynamite. "Hello, Atticus," Lydia said softly. "Hello, Lydia," I said. I did not ask how she was. I did not ask about the traffic. I stared at the envelope. "Have you ordered yet?" she asked. I shook my head. She signaled the waiter and ordered a black coffee. When the waiter left, she folded her hands on the table. She had beautiful hands, strong and capable, but they were clasped tight together. Her knuckles were slightly pale. "You know I had to call in a few favors to get this done so quickly," she said. "The lab usually takes a week. We got it in 48 hours. "I know," I said. "I appreciate it." Lydia took a deep breath. She looked out the window at the rain. She seemed to be looking for the right words. She seemed to be looking for a way to soften a blow that could not be softened. "Atticus," she said, "you are a strong man. You have buried a wife. You have buried friends. You have built an empire from nothing." "Just tell me, Lydia," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just tell me what is inside that envelope. Lydia looked me in the eye. There was profound sadness in her gaze. I think you should open it, she said. I think you need to see it for yourself. Because if I tell you, you might not believe me. You might think I am making a mistake. But the numbers do not lie, Atticus. The science does not lie. I reached out my hand. My hand was large and calloused. It was a hand that had changed tires on the side of a highway in the freezing rain. It was a hand that had held a rifle in a jungle. It was a hand that had cradled my wife's head as she took her last breath. But as I reached for that yellow envelope, my hand betrayed me. It began to shake. A fine tremor started in my fingers and worked its way up to my wrist. I pulled my hand back. I clenched it into a fist. I forced it to be still. Then I reached out again. The texture of the paper was rough against my fingertips. It felt cold. I slid the envelope across the wooden table. The sound of paper scraping against wood seemed deafening in the quiet shop. It sounded like a heavy stone being dragged across a tomb. I held the envelope in my hands. It was light. It weighed less than an ounce. How could something so light contain so much weight? How could a few sheets of paper contain the power to destroy a family, to destroy a legacy, to destroy a man's heart? I hesitated. For a moment I wanted to tear it up. I wanted to throw it in the trash and walk away. I wanted to go back to the lie. The lie was comfortable. The lie was warm. In the lie I had a grandson. In the lie I had a legacy. In the lie Leo was mine. I thought about Leo. I closed my eyes and I saw him clearly. I saw the way he laughed when I tickled him. I saw the way he concentrated when he was building a tower of blocks. I saw the way he looked at me with those big, trusting eyes. I remembered the day he was born. I remembered holding him in the hospital room. He was so small, so fragile. I remembered looking at his face and promising him that I would protect him from the world. I promised him that he would never know hunger. He would never know fear. He would be a Mercer. And being a Mercer meant something. If I opened this envelope, that promise might be broken. If I opened this envelope, the boy I loved might cease to exist. Not in body, but in spirit. He would transform from my flesh and blood into a stranger, into an intruder. But I was Atticus Mercer, and Mercers do not live in lies. We live in the truth, no matter how ugly it is. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I slid my finger under the flap of the envelope. The glue gave way with a sharp tearing sound. It sounded like fabric ripping. I reached inside and pulled out the documents. There were 3 pages stapled together. The letterhead was from the Genetic Identity Laboratory of Atlanta. I skipped the preamble. I skipped the methodology. I skipped the legal disclaimers. I went straight to the bottom of the second page, to the section titled Conclusions. The words swam before my eyes. I had to blink to clear my vision. The alleged father, Kendrick Mercer, is excluded as the biological father of the child, Leo Mercer. I read it again. Excluded. It was a cold, clinical word. It sounded like something you would say about a bad data point in a spreadsheet. Excluded. Then I looked at the numbers. Probability of paternity 0.00%. 0. A perfect circle. A black hole. A void where my family used to be. I felt the air leave the room. The sound of the coffee machine faded. The sound of the rain faded. The only thing I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. It sounded like the ocean. It sounded like a storm. I put the paper down. I looked at the third page. This was the additional test I had paid for. The test comparing the child's DNA to the database of known markers and specifically to the profile associated with the other sample I had provided. The sample I had pulled from a discarded coffee cup Grant had thrown away at the tennis club yesterday. I had not told you about that part. I had gone back. I had dug through the trash like a raccoon to find his cup, because I had to be sure. I looked at the result. Probability of paternity for Grant Anderson, 99.99%. Grant Anderson, the tennis coach, the gambler, the blackmailer, he was the father. The biological reality stared up at me. It was indisputable. It was scientific fact. My son Kendrick had been raising another man's child for 4 years. He had been feeding him, clothing him, reading him bedtime stories. He had given his heart to a cuckoo bird that had been laid in his nest. and Courtney. I saw her face in my mind. I saw her smiling at the funeral. I saw her demanding the master bedroom. I saw her spending my money. She knew. She had known every single day. Every time she looked at Leo, she knew. Every time she kissed Kendrick, she knew. She had built her entire life on a foundation of fraud. She had looked me in the eye for years and lied without blinking. I felt something break inside my chest. It was not a metaphor. I felt a physical snap. It felt like a rib cracking. A sound escaped my throat. It was a low, guttural sound. It was the sound a wounded animal makes when it realizes it cannot run anymore. I covered my face with my hands, my large, rough hands. I did not want to cry. I was a Marine. Marines do not cry in coffee shops. But the tears came anyway. They were hot and stinging. They leaked through my fingers and ran down my wrists. I wept for Kendrick, my foolish, weak son who was living a tragedy he did not even know about. I wept for Leo, the innocent boy who was now a pawn in a sick game. I wept because I realized that in a few days I would have to reject him. I would have to turn my back on him, because he was not mine. And the pain of that future separation was already tearing me apart. And I wept for myself, for the old man who thought he had a legacy, for the man who thought he was working for the next generation. It was all gone. I was alone. I was truly, completely alone. Lydia did not speak. She reached across the table and placed her hand on my arm. Her grip was firm. She was an anchor in the storm. We sat there for a long time. 5 minutes, maybe 10. I let the grief wash over me. I let it drown me. And then the tide turned. The sorrow began to recede, and in its place came something else, something colder, something harder. It started in my gut, a burning heat. It moved up my spine, straightening my back. It moved into my jaw, clenching my teeth. It was rage, but not the hot, chaotic rage of a young man. This was the cold, calculated rage of an old man who has nothing left to lose. I thought about Courtney laughing at the funeral. I thought about Grant demanding money. I thought about them spending my wife's savings on vacations and cars while they laughed at us behind our backs. They had not just lied to me. They had insulted me. They had insulted Camille. They had insulted the very concept of family. They thought I was a senile old fool. They thought I was a wallet with a pulse. I wiped my face with a napkin. I wiped it hard, scrubbing away the tears until my skin was red. I took a deep breath. The air tasted different now. It tasted sharp. It tasted like ozone before a lightning strike. I picked up the papers. I folded them neatly. I put them back into the yellow envelope. I looked at Lydia. My eyes were dry now. They were cold. Lydia saw the change. She pulled her hand back. She sat up straighter. She knew this look. She had seen it once before when a competitor tried to execute a hostile takeover of my company. I had destroyed that man so completely that he ended up working at a gas station. "Atticus," she said. Her voice was cautious. "What do you want to do?" "I want everything," I said. My voice was low. It sounded like gravel grinding together. Everything she asked. "I want the house. I want the company. I want the cars. I want the jewelry. I want every single dime I ever gave them." I leaned forward. "Initiate Project Phoenix," I said. Lydia's eyes widened. Project Phoenix was a scorched earth protocol we had drafted years ago as a joke. A theoretical plan for total asset liquidation and legal warfare. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This will destroy Kendrick too. He is a victim in this, Atticus. He is a casualty," I said. "War has casualties. He is weak, Lydia. He let a wolf into the house because he was too cowardly to lock the door. He needs to learn. Pain is the only teacher that fools listen to." "But the boy," she whispered. "Leo." I looked at the envelope. "There is no Leo Mercer," I said. "There is only Leo Anderson, and his father can pay for his preschool." I stood up, I buttoned my jacket, I picked up the envelope. "Set up the meeting," I said, "the inheritance meeting. Tell them I am ready to sign over the company. Tell them to invite everyone, the board, the partners. Tell Courtney to invite her friends." "You want an audience?" Lydia asked. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was a smile that promised violence. "If I'm going to conduct an execution," I said, "I want witnesses." I walked out of the coffee shop into the rain. I did not open my umbrella. I let the cold water hit my face. It felt good. It washed away the tears. It washed away the grief. All that was left was the mission. I walked to my car, gripping the yellow envelope like a weapon. It was time to go home. It was time to feed the vultures. And I had a meal prepared for them that would choke them to death. The drive home from the coffee shop was the longest commute of my life. It was not because of the traffic. It was because I was using every mile to prepare for the greatest performance of my career. I was not an actor. I was a logistics expert. I dealt in facts and schedules and hard steel. But war teaches you adaptation. And if I wanted to trap a predator, I had to become the wounded prey. I pulled into the driveway. I turned off the engine. I adjusted the rearview mirror. The man staring back at me looked too strong. His jaw was set too tight. His eyes were burning with the cold fire of vengeance. I closed my eyes. I thought about the weight of 80 years. I thought about gravity pulling my bones down. I thought about the confusion that clouds the mind when the blood stops flowing right. I forced my shoulders to slump. I forced my mouth to slacken slightly. I practiced a tremor in my right hand. When I opened my eyes, the Marine was gone. In his place was a tired, broken old man, a man who was ready to surrender. I stepped out of the car. I leaned heavily on my cane. I dragged my left foot slightly as I walked up the steps. It was a subtle touch, a hint of a stroke, a hint of weakness. I opened the front door. The house was quiet. "Courtney," I called out. My voice was raspy. I made sure it cracked on the second syllable. I heard footsteps coming from the kitchen. Courtney appeared in the hallway. She was wearing a silk kimono and holding a glass of green juice. She looked annoyed. "What is it, Atticus?" she asked. "I am in the middle of a meditation session." I walked toward her. I took 3 steps and then I let my knees buckle. I did not fall completely. I caught myself on the hallway table. I knocked over a vase of flowers. The ceramic shattered on the hardwood floor. The water splashed onto my shoes. "Atticus," she shouted. She did not run to help me. She ran to check the floorboards. "Watch out, that water is going to stain the oak." I gripped the edge of the table. I let my hand shake violently. The knuckles turned white. "I am sorry," I whispered. I felt dizzy. The room spun. Courtney looked at me then. She saw the sweat on my forehead. She saw the way my hand was trembling. She saw the confusion in my eyes. And then she smiled. It was not a wide smile. It was a small, involuntary twitch of the lips. It was the smile of a vulture spotting a carcass in the desert. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her voice softened, but the greed in her eyes sharpened. "Do you need a doctor?" "No," I said quickly. "No doctors. They will put me in a home." "Please, Courtney, no home." I sounded pathetic. I sounded terrified. She walked over to me. She put a hand on my shoulder. It felt cold. "Come sit down, Atticus," she said. "You are just tired. You have been under so much stress. The company, the grief. It is too much for a man your age." She led me to the living room. She sat me down in the armchair. The leather swallowed me up. I looked around the room. I looked at the ceiling where my hidden microphone was taping every second of this charade. "I think you are right," I said. I looked at my hands. They were still shaking. "I cannot do it anymore, Courtney. The numbers, the trucks, the noise, it is all a blur. Today at the coffee shop, I forgot where I was. I forgot my own name for a minute." Courtney sat on the sofa opposite me. She leaned forward. She looked like a cobra hypnotizing a mouse. "That is scary, Atticus," she said. "But it is normal. It is just age. Maybe it is time to let go." I nodded. A tear leaked out of my eye. It was a real tear, but not for the reason she thought. I was crying for the betrayal, not the weakness. "I want to sign it over," I said. The air in the room changed. It became electric, what she asked breathlessly. "The company," I said, "and the house. Everything. I want to transfer it to Kendrick and to you. I want to retire. I want to go to the coast. Maybe sit by the ocean and wait for the end." Courtney stood up. She paced the room. She was practically vibrating with excitement. "That is a wise decision, Atticus," she said. "Kendrick is ready. We are ready. We can take care of the heavy lifting. You deserve to rest." She went to the desk in the corner. She pulled out a notepad and a pen. She came back and handed them to me. "Just to be clear," she said. "Write it down, just a draft, so I can show the lawyers exactly what you want. We do not want any confusion later." I took the notepad. I took the pen. My hand shook so hard the pen rattled against the paper. I looked at the page. I looked at her. "What should I write?" I asked. My voice sounded lost. "Write that you are of sound mind," Courtney said, the irony thick enough to choke on. Write that you are transferring 100% of Mercer haulage and all real estate assets to Kendrick and Courtney Mercer effective immediately. I put the pen to the paper. I wrote slowly. The letters were jagged. They looked like the writing of a child or a dying man. I, Atticus Mercer. I stopped. I looked up. Courtney, I said. Do I have to leave the house immediately? No, she said soothingly. Take your time. A week, maybe 2. We will find you a nice place with a view. I looked back at the paper. I continued writing. Transfer all assets. I finished the note. I signed it at the bottom. But I did not sign Atticus Mercer. I let my hand slip. I let the pen drag. The signature was an illegible scrawl. It looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. And in the middle of that mess, I distinctly wrote the letters V-O-I-D, hidden in the loops of the cursive. I handed the pad to Courtney. She snatched it from my hand. She did not look at the signature. She did not analyze the handwriting. She only saw the promise of millions. Perfect, she said. This is perfect. She clutched the notepad to her chest. She looked at me with something that almost resembled affection. It was the affection a parasite feels for its host. I will call the lawyers, she said. We can have the official papers drawn up by tomorrow. Wait, I said. I sat up a little straighter. This was the hook. I want to do it right, I said. I want a ceremony. A ceremony, she asked. Yes, I said. I built this company from nothing. I want to hand it over with dignity. I want the board of directors to be there. I want our biggest partners. I want the drivers' representatives. And I want your friends. My friends? She asked, confused. Yes, I said. The people you are going to launch your new business with. Let them see that you have the power now. Let them see the torch being passed. I saw the vanity flare up in her eyes. She imagined the scene, her standing in the boardroom, the keys to the kingdom being placed in her hand while everyone watched. It appealed to her narcissism. It appealed to her need for validation. That sounds lovely, Atticus, she said. A celebration. Yes, I said. A celebration of the future. And Leo, I added. Leo must be there. He is the heir. He should see his legacy. Of course, she said, smiling. Leo will be there. And invite your tennis coach, I said casually. She froze. The smile wavered. Grant? She asked. Why Grant? He seems to be a good influence on the boy, I said. Leo talks about him all the time. If he is going to be part of Leo's life, he should be there to understand the responsibility. She relaxed. She bought it. She thought I was just a senile old man trying to be inclusive. She did not know I was inviting the executioner to his own hanging. Okay, she said. I will invite Grant. Good, I said. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I am tired now, Courtney. I need to sleep. I stayed in the chair. I listened to her walk away. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs. They were light and bouncy. She was running to call Kendrick. She was running to call Grant. She was running to tell them that the old lion had finally lost his teeth. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Then I opened my eyes. I stopped shaking. I picked up the glass of water from the table. I held it perfectly steady. The water did not ripple. I looked at the spot on the floor where I had dropped the vase. The shards were still there. They thought I was broken like that vase. They thought I was a mess to be swept up and thrown away. I stood up. I did not need the cane. I walked to the window and looked out at the estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The trap was set. The bait was taken. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my gut. It was better than whiskey. You want a show, Courtney, I whispered to the glass. You want a ceremony. I will give you a ceremony. It will be the red wedding of corporate Atlanta. I walked to the basement door. I needed to call Lydia. We had work to do. We had to prepare the slide deck. We had to prepare the security, and we had to prepare the surprise guest. As I walked down the stairs into the darkness of my bunker, I started to hum a little tune. It was an old marching song from boot camp. If I die in the combat zone, box me up and ship me home. But I was not dying, not yet. I was just reloading. The performance in the living room was just the rehearsal. The opening night was coming, and I was going to make sure that when the curtain fell, nobody would ever forget the name Atticus Mercer. I sat at my desk and pulled out the file on Grant. I pulled out the file on Kendrick. And I pulled out the yellow envelope with the DNA test. I laid them out like a royal flush in poker. All in, I said. I turned off the light. The The darkness was my friend now, and in the darkness I smiled, a real smile, a wolf smile. The packages started arriving at 9 in the morning on Friday. They came in white vans and brown trucks. They piled up in the foyer like a barricade of cardboard and greed. Courtney was not waiting for the ink to dry. She was not waiting for the lawyers to stamp the documents. She was spending the inheritance before she even had the keys to the vault. I sat in my armchair in the corner of the living room. I had my cane across my knees. I looked like a piece of old furniture that everyone had forgotten to move. But my eyes were sharp. I watched Courtney tear open a box from a high-end boutique in Paris. She pulled out a dress. It was gold. It was covered in sequins that caught the light and shattered it into 1,000 blinding fragments. It looked like armor made of coins. It looked like something a conqueror would wear to humiliate the vanquished. "It is $5,000, Kendrick whispered. He was standing near the stairs holding the invoice. He looked pale. He looked sick. "We do not have this kind of cash in the joint account, Courtney. The credit card is already maxed out from the deposit on the yacht." Courtney did not look at him. She held the dress up against her body and spun around in front of the mirror. The sequins hissed as they moved. "Stop being such a peasant, Kendrick," she said, laughing. Her laugh was brittle and high. "By Monday morning, we will have access to the corporate reserves. The company makes $40 million a year. $5,000 is a rounding error. It is lunch money." She turned to me. She walked over and dangled the gold fabric in front of my face. "Do you like it, Atticus?" she asked. "I bought it for the ceremony. I want to look festive when you sign the papers. It is a celebration after all." I looked at the dress. I looked at her. "It is very shiny," I said. My voice was low and trembling. "It looks expensive." "It is quality," she corrected me. "And I deserve quality. I have put up with this gloomy house and your dusty trucks for 5 years. It is time for a little glamour." She tossed the dress onto the sofa and went back to the pile of boxes. She pulled out a watch. It was a Rolex, a Submariner with a blue dial. She threw it at Kendrick. He caught it clumsily. "There," she said. "That is for you. Stop looking so depressed. You are going to be the CEO of a major logistics firm. You need to look the part. You cannot wear that cheap digital thing anymore." Kendrick looked at the watch. I saw the conflict in his eyes. He knew they could not afford this. He knew it was reckless. But the greed was winning. The shiny object was seducing him just like she had seduced him 5 years ago. He put the watch on his wrist. He turned it over, admiring the weight of it. "Thanks, baby," he muttered. "It is nice." I closed my eyes. He was hopeless. He was a man who would sell his soul for a pat on the head and a shiny toy. Then the doorbell rang. It was not a delivery driver. It was Grant. He walked in like he owned the place. He was wearing white linen pants and a blue blazer. He looked like he had just stepped off a sailboat. He was carrying a bottle of champagne. "Hey, family," he shouted. "Let us get this party started early." Kendrick stiffened. He looked at Grant, then he looked at Courtney. "What is he doing here?" Kendrick asked. His voice was tight. Courtney walked over to Grant and gave him a hug. It was a long hug, too long for a tennis coach. She pressed her body against his. I saw Grant's hand linger on her lower back. I saw him smirk over her shoulder at my son. "I invited him," Courtney said, pulling away but keeping her hand on Grant's arm. "He is going to help us set up the room for the meeting. And he is going to help with the catering. You know how good he is with events." Kendrick stepped forward. "We have staff for that, Courtney. We do not need your tennis coach arranging the chairs." Courtney's eyes flashed. She let go of Grant and walked up to Kendrick. She poked him in the chest with a manicured finger. "Stop it," she hissed. "Stop being insecure. Grant has been a rock for me during this transition. He has helped Leo with his confidence. He is a friend of the family. And since we are about to be the most powerful family in Atlanta, we need all the friends we can get. Do not ruin my mood, Kendrick. Not today." Kendrick deflated. He looked at the Rolex on his wrist. He looked at his wife. He looked at the man who was sleeping with his wife. And he swallowed his pride. He swallowed it whole. "Okay," he said quietly. "Sorry. Thanks for coming, Grant." Grant smiled. It was a predator's smile. "No problem, buddy," he said. "I am just here to serve." He walked past Kendrick and came over to me. He looked down at me with mock pity. "How are you doing, old-timer?" he asked. "Ready for the big day?" I looked up at him. I saw the greed in his blue eyes. I saw the arrogance. He thought I was a senile old fool who was handing him a fortune. He thought he had won the lottery without buying a ticket. "I am ready," I said. My voice was raspy. "I just want it to be over. I want to rest." Grant laughed. He patted me on the shoulder. "Don't worry, Pops," he said. "After tomorrow you can rest as much as you want. We will take it from here." He walked toward the kitchen with Courtney. I heard the pop of a champagne cork. I heard them laughing. Kendrick stood alone in the foyer surrounded by empty cardboard boxes. He looked at his new watch again. He was checking the time. But he did not know that his time had already run out. I sat there and watched them. It was a fascinating study in human nature. They were drunk on power they did not possess. They were celebrating a victory that had not happened. They were vultures circling a body that was not dead. Courtney spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone. She was calling the board members. She was calling the partners. She was calling her friends from the country club. "You simply must come," she said into the phone, her voice dripping with honey. "It is going to be historic. Atticus is formally stepping down. Yes, the whole company. We are rebranding. It is going to be fabulous. Champagne and caviar. Noon sharp. Do not be late." She was building an audience. She wanted witnesses for her coronation. She wanted everyone to see her ascend to the throne. She did not know that I wanted an audience too. I wanted witnesses for the execution. By evening, the house was transformed. The dining room table had been moved to the center of the room. A white tablecloth covered the scratches. Crystal glasses were lined up like soldiers. There were flowers everywhere, expensive lilies that smelled cloying and sweet. Courtney had hired a catering team. They were busy in the kitchen prepping hors d'oeuvres. Grant was supervising them, barking orders like he was the general manager. Kendrick was sitting on the sofa drinking scotch. He was drunk. He was trying to drown the little voice in his head that told him something was wrong. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Courtney and Grant were standing by the refrigerator. They did not see me. Grant had his hand in Courtney's hair. He was whispering something to her. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow night we celebrate for real. Once the papers are signed, I am buying a Porsche, a 911 Turbo, black." Courtney giggled. "You can buy 10 Porsches, baby," she said. "We are going to be kings." I cleared my throat. They jumped apart. Grant smoothed his blazer. Courtney fixed her hair. "Oh, Atticus," she said. "You scared me. You should wear a bell." "I need water," I said, shuffling forward. "My throat is dry." Grant stepped aside. "Here, let me get that for you, Pops," he said. He poured a glass of water from the pitcher. He handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine. His skin was warm. He was alive. He was vibrant. He had no idea that in 24 hours he would be wishing he had never met me. "Thank you," I said. I took the water and shuffled back to the hallway. I walked past Kendrick. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. "Dad," he said. I stopped. "Dad, are you sure about this?" he asked. His voice was slurred. "I mean, giving it all up. You love the company." I looked at my son. For a split second, I felt a pang of pity. He was asking for a lifeline. He was asking me to stop him from destroying himself. But it was too late. The lesson had to be learned. "I am sure, Kendrick," I said. "It is time for the truth to come out." He nodded. He thought I meant the truth about my retirement. He did not know I meant the truth about his entire life. I went down to my basement. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my desk and polished my shoes. I polished them until they shone like black mirrors. I ironed my best suit. I cleaned my medals. I was not dressing for a party. I was dressing for war. Upstairs, the music finally stopped around 2 in the morning. I heard Grant's car leave. I heard Courtney and Kendrick go to bed. The house fell silent. But it was a heavy silence. The air was thick with lies. I looked at the yellow envelope sitting on my desk. It was the only honest thing in the house. I picked it up. I weighed it in my hand. Tomorrow, they would gather. The lawyers, the bankers, the social climbers, the vultures. They would come to see the old lion die. They would come to pick the meat off my bones. But the lion was not dying. The lion was just waiting in the tall grass. And when they stepped into the clearing, I was going to tear their throats out. I put the envelope in the inside pocket of my suit jacket. It fit perfectly next to my heart. I lay down on the cot and closed my eyes. I slept like a baby. I slept the deep, peaceful sleep of a man who knows exactly what he is going to do when the sun comes up. The boardroom of Mercer Hollidge was not a room designed for comfort. It was a room designed for war. I had built it 30 years ago with walls of soundproof glass and a table made of reclaimed timber from a shipyard. It was a place where I had negotiated union contracts. It was a place where I had stared down federal regulators. It was a place where I had fired men who stole from me. Today it smelled of fresh lilies and expensive cologne. It smelled of a funeral. I sat at the head of the table. It was the seat I had occupied for 3 decades. But today I felt like a guest in my own house. I was wearing my best suit. It was a charcoal gray wool tailored to fit my frame perfectly. I had polished my shoes until I could see my own reflection in the leather. I held my cane in my right hand, resting it against the floor. I did not need it, but it was part of the costume. It was the prop that sold the lie. The room was full. Courtney had done her job well. She had packed the room with witnesses. There were 12 members of the board of directors, men and women I had made rich. They sat in their leather chairs, avoiding my eyes. They looked at their phones. They looked at the view of the Atlanta skyline. They looked anywhere but at the old man they were about to betray. Then there were Courtney's friends, the social climbers, the influencers. They stood around the perimeter of the room holding flutes of champagne. They were whispering and giggling. To them, this was not a corporate transition. It was a launch party. It was content for their social media feeds. I saw phones raised capturing the scene. I saw the flashes going off. And then there were the family members. Kendrick sat to my right. He was wearing the Rolex Courtney had bought him. He kept twisting it on his wrist. The metal was too heavy for him. He looked pale. He was sweating despite the air conditioning being set to 68 degrees. He drank water constantly, his hand shaking every time he lifted the glass. He knew this was wrong. Somewhere deep inside his weak heart, he knew he was committing patricide, but he was too afraid of his wife to stop it. Grant stood behind Courtney. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. He looked like the cat who had just eaten the canary. He was wearing a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. He caught my eye and winked. It was a conspiratorial wink. It said, "We won, old man. Just die already." Courtney stood at the other end of the table. She was wearing the gold dress. It shimmered under the fluorescent lights. She looked radiant. She looked like a queen who had just conquered a new kingdom. She held a stack of documents in her hands, the transfer papers. She tapped a spoon against her champagne glass. The sharp sound cut through the murmurs. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," she said. Her voice was smooth and practiced. "Today is a historic day for Mercer Hollidge. Today we honor the past, but we embrace the future." She gestured toward me. I sat still. I kept my face blank. I kept my mouth slightly open. I played the part of the confused geriatric perfectly. "Atticus Mercer is a legend," she continued. "He built this company with his bare hands. But time marches on, and as we navigate the new digital economy, we need new leadership. We need fresh vision. Atticus has graciously agreed to step down and pass the torch to the next generation. To Kendrick and myself." There was a polite round of applause. The board members clapped softly. The influencers cheered. Courtney walked toward me. The sound of her high heels on the hardwood floor was a rhythmic click, click, click. It sounded like a countdown. She placed the documents on the table in front of me. She placed a heavy gold pen on top of them. "Here we are, Atticus," she said, "just like we discussed." I looked at the papers. They were thick, legal jargon printed in small font. I did not need to read them. I knew what they said. They said that I was giving up everything. My company, my home, my legacy. I reached for the pen. My hand trembled. I let it hover over the paper. The room held its breath. I could feel the anticipation. They were all waiting for the signature. They were waiting for the money to be released. I looked up at Courtney. She was standing close to me, too close. She leaned down. She put her hand on my shoulder. It was meant to look like a gesture of comfort for the cameras, but her grip was tight. Her nails dug into my suit jacket. She brought her face next to mine. She smelled of champagne and victory. "Sign it," she whispered. I looked at her. I let my eyes wander around the room. I looked at Kendrick. I looked at Grant. I looked at the board members. I have a question, I said. My voice was weak. It cracked. Courtney stiffened. What is it, Atticus? Where is Leo? I asked. I wanted him to be here. Courtney sighed. She sounded impatient. He is in the break room with the nanny Atticus. This is a business meeting. Children do not belong here. Just sign the papers and you can go see him. She was lying. The nanny was not here. Leo was probably at home with a babysitter. She had not brought him because she did not want him to distract from her moment. I hesitated. I put the pen down. I don't know, I muttered. It feels final. Courtney leaned closer. Her hair brushed my cheek. Her voice dropped to a hiss that only I could hear. It was the voice of the devil herself. Listen to me, you old fool, she whispered. Stop stalling. Nobody here cares about your feelings. They are here for the open bar and the equity. She squeezed my shoulder harder. It was painful. Now that the old woman is gone, she said, referring to Camille. You are alone, Atticus. You are useless. You will put the company in my son's name, and you will fend for yourself. If you do not sign this right now, I will put you in a state facility so fast your head will spin. I have the medical power of attorney. Do not test me. The words hung in the air between us. Now that the old woman is gone, she had said it. She had invoked the name of my wife as a weapon. She had threatened me with a nursing home. She had shown her true face. I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen, and then I looked at her. The trembling in my hand stopped. My shoulders straightened. The slump in my spine disappeared. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the air of the room, and then I smiled. It was not the confused smile of a senile man. It was not the polite smile of a businessman. It was a wolf's smile. It was a smile full of teeth. Courtney saw the change. She pulled back slightly. Her eyes widened. She saw the light come back into my eyes. She saw the clarity. She saw the danger. Why are you smiling? She asked. Her voice faltered. I picked up the pen, but I did not position it to sign. I held it like a dagger, because I said. My voice was strong. It was deep. It boomed across the silent room. You made a mistake, Courtney. What mistake? She asked. She looked around nervously. Grant took a step forward. Kendrick stood up. You thought I was alone, I said. I stood up. I pushed the chair back. It scraped loudly against the floor. I stood to my full height. 6 feet 2 inches of Marine Corps discipline. I did not lean on the cane. I held it in my hand like a scepter. I looked at the board members. You think I am senile? I asked them. You think I am finished? I looked at Grant. And you? I said, pointing the cane at him. You think you won the lottery? Grant looked confused. He looked at Courtney. What is going on? He asked. I looked back at Courtney. She was pale. The gold dress suddenly looked tacky. It looked cheap. You said I would fend for myself, I said. You said I was alone because Camille is gone. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a remote control. But you forgot one thing, I said. What she whispered. I am never alone, I said. I have the truth. I pressed the button on the remote. At the far end of the room, a large screen descended from the ceiling. The lights in the room dimmed automatically. The hum of the projector fan filled the silence. Courtney looked at the screen. Kendrick looked at the screen. What is this? Courtney demanded. Her voice rose to a shriek. What are you doing, Atticus? I am conducting a performance review, I said. I looked at Lydia Stone, who was sitting in the corner near the door. She had been invisible until now. She stood up and locked the boardroom door. The click of the lock was loud and final. Sit down, everyone, I commanded. Nobody moved. I slammed my cane onto the table. The heavy wood cracked against the surface. The sound was like a gunshot. I said, sit down, I roared. They sat. Even Grant sat. The authority in my voice was absolute. It was the voice of a man who had led men into battle. I looked at Courtney one last time. You wanted a ceremony, I said softly. You wanted to celebrate the future of the Mercer family. I pointed at the screen. Let us watch the future, I said, and let us see who really belongs in it. I pressed play. The hum of the projector fan was the only sound in the room. It sounded like a swarm of angry bees trapped inside a tin can. The white light from the screen washed over the faces of the people sitting at the table. It turned their skin pale and ghostly. It made the expensive makeup on Courtney's face look like a cracked mask. I sat back in my chair. I folded my hands over the head of my cane. I was not a participant anymore. I was the audience. I was the director. And the show was about to begin. The first image to appear on the screen was grainy. It was black and white. It was footage from the camera I had hidden in the garage 3 weeks ago. It showed the rear of Courtney's white Range Rover. Courtney let out a small, nervous laugh. "What is this, Atticus?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is this some kind of home movie?" I did not answer. I just pointed a finger at the screen. On the video, Grant walked into the frame. He was wearing his tennis whites. He leaned against the car. Courtney walked into the frame a second later. She was not wearing tennis clothes. She was wearing a bathrobe. Kendrick leaned forward. He squinted at the screen. "That is our garage," he said. "Why is Grant in our garage at night?" Then the audio kicked in. It was crisp and clear. I had spent hours enhancing the sound, removing the background noise of the air conditioning units. The voice of Grant filled the boardroom. "When is the old man going to die, Courtney? I am tired of waiting." The room gasped. It was a collective sharp intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the air. The board members looked at each other. The influencers lowered their phones. This was not the content they had expected. On the screen, Courtney laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. "He is too stubborn to die. Grant," she said. "We have to wait for the stroke or the heart attack. I am doing my best to stress him out. I moved his things to the basement. I am hoping the dampness gives him pneumonia." Kendrick turned to look at his wife. His mouth was open. He looked like a fish that had been pulled out of the water. "You said you moved him for his own good," Kendrick stammered. "You said the basement had better energy." Courtney did not look at him. She was staring at the screen, her eyes wide with terror. She started to stand up. "Turn it off," she screamed. "This is illegal. You cannot film people without their consent." I spoke up then. My voice was calm. "It is my house, Courtney," I said. "It is my garage. I can film whatever I want. Sit down." Lydia Stone took a step forward from the corner. She did not say anything, but her presence was enough. Courtney sank back into her chair. She looked trapped. The video cut to a new scene. This one was in color. It was the footage from the camera hidden in Kendrick's office. It showed Courtney sitting at Kendrick's desk. She was drinking my scotch. She was talking on the phone. The audio was even clearer this time. "He is such a loser, Grant," she said into the phone. "Kendrick, I mean. He follows me around like a puppy. I tell him to jump, and he asks how high. He actually thinks he is running the company. It is pathetic. As soon as we get the money, I am divorcing him. I will give him a small allowance and send him to a rehab center for exhaustion. Then we can really start living." Kendrick made a sound. It was a whimpering sound, low in his throat. He looked at the Rolex on his wrist, the gift she had given him just yesterday. He looked at it as if it were a shackle. "That is not true," Courtney shouted. She reached out and grabbed Kendrick's arm. "Baby, that is out of context. I was angry. We had a fight. You know how I get when I have had a few drinks. I didn't mean it." Kendrick pulled his arm away. He did not look at her. He kept his eyes glued to the screen. He was watching his life disintegrate frame by frame. The video cut again. This was the footage I had taken myself at the tennis club. It was shaky at first, then it zoomed in. It showed Grant pinning Courtney against her car. It showed the aggression. It showed the intimacy. Grant's voice came through the speakers. "I want my money, Courtney," Courtney's voice replied. "I am trying. Atticus is watching the accounts." Grant laughed on the screen. It was a nasty sound. "You better try harder, or I will tell Kendrick that his son is not his son." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear the heartbeat of the man sitting next to you. Kendrick stood up. He knocked his chair over. It fell backward with a loud crash. He stood there shaking. His face was no longer pale. It was red. A deep, violent crimson that started at his neck and spread to his hairline. He looked at the screen where the image of his wife and her lover was frozen. Then he turned slowly to look at Grant. Grant was sitting very still. The arrogance was gone. The smile was gone. He looked like a rat that had been cornered by a cat. He held up his hands, palms out. "Now, Kendrick, listen," Grant said, his voice cracking. "It is not what it looks like. That video is doctored. Deepfake technology is very advanced these days. Atticus is trying to frame me." Kendrick did not speak. He walked around the table. He moved slowly like a zombie. Courtney pleaded. She stood up and tried to block his path. "Baby, please listen to me. Your father is senile. He is jealous of us. He made this up." Kendrick looked at her. For the first time in his life, he really looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw the deception. He saw the years of lies etched into the lines of her face. He pushed her aside. He did not hit her. He just shoved her out of his way as if she were a piece of furniture. He walked up to Grant. Grant stood up. He was taller than Kendrick. He was more muscular. But he was a coward. And Kendrick was fueled by the rage of a man who has lost everything. "Tell me it is a lie," Kendrick said. His voice was a whisper. But it was the most dangerous whisper I had ever heard. Grant looked at the door. It was locked. He looked at the window. It was 30 floors up. "Kendrick, come on, man," Grant said, forcing a smile. "We are friends. We play tennis." Kendrick grabbed a crystal pitcher of water from the table. "Tell me it is a lie," he screamed. He swung the pitcher. It smashed into the wall inches from Grant's head. Glass shattered everywhere. Water splashed over the expensive suits of the board members. Grant ducked, covering his head. Kendrick lunged at him. He grabbed Grant by the lapels of his white linen jacket. He slammed him against the wall. "You slept with my wife," Kendrick roared. "You slept with her in my house. You drank my wine. You smiled at my face." Grant tried to push him away. "Get off me, you psycho!" Grant yelled. Kendrick punched him. It was a clumsy punch. It landed on Grant's jaw, but it had the weight of 5 years of humiliation behind it. Grant stumbled back. Blood started to trickle from his lip. Courtney screamed, "Stop it! Stop it right now!" She ran toward them. She tried to pull Kendrick off. Kendrick spun around. He looked at her with eyes that were dead. "Don't touch me," he said. "Don't you ever touch me again." He looked at the screen again. The video was looping. It was playing the part where Courtney called him a loser, over and over again. "He is such a loser. He is such a loser." Kendrick put his hands over his ears. He looked like a child trying to block out the sound of thunder. I watched from the head of the table. I did not move. I did not tell the security guards to intervene. This was necessary. Kendrick needed to feel this. He needed to feel the burn. He needed to feel the knife twisting in his back, so he would never forget what it felt like to trust the wrong people. The board members were standing up now. They were backing away toward the corners of the room. They looked terrified. They looked at me with new eyes. They realized that I was not a frail old man being pushed out. I was the one pulling the strings. I had orchestrated this chaos. I had invited them here not to witness a transition, but to witness a demolition. I picked up the remote. I pressed the pause button. The room went quiet again. The only sound was Kendrick's heavy breathing and Grant's whimpering. I stood up. I walked over to Kendrick. I placed my hand on his shoulder. He flinched. He looked at me. His eyes were full of tears. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, tell me the rest is a lie. Tell me she didn't mean it." I looked at him. I loved him, but I could not lie to him. Not anymore. I looked at the screen where the frozen image showed Grant's face. "I have one more thing to show you," I said. What Kendrick asked. He looked exhausted. He looked like he could not take another blow. But the final blow was the hardest one. The final blow was the one that would kill the boy inside him and force the man to be born. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out the yellow envelope. Courtney saw the envelope. She stopped screaming. She stopped moving. Her face went gray. She knew what was inside. She had known for 4 years. "No," she whispered. "Atticus, please. Not that. Please do not do that." I ignored her. I handed the envelope to Kendrick. "It is not a video," I said. "It is science." Kendrick took the envelope. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped it. "What is this?" he asked. "It is the answer to the question you were too afraid to ask," I said. Kendrick looked at the envelope. He looked at Courtney. She was shaking her head, pleading with her eyes. "Don't open it, Kendrick," she begged. "If you open it, we are over." Kendrick looked at her. He looked at Grant, who was wiping blood from his lip. "We were over the moment you walked into that garage," he said. He ripped the envelope open. He pulled out the papers. He read the first page. He stopped. He read it again. The room watched him. We watched the moment his heart stopped beating. We watched the moment the last thread of his life snapped. He looked up. He looked at Leo's empty chair at the table. "He is not mine," he whispered. He looked at me. "He is not mine, Dad." I shook my head slowly. "No, son. He is not." Kendrick turned to Grant. He held up the paper. Grant looked at the paper. He didn't need to read it. He knew. Grant smiled. A bloody, broken smile. "I told you," Grant said. "I told you I had good genes." Kendrick did not punch him again. He did not scream. He just dropped the paper. It floated down to the floor, landing on the wet carpet. He turned to Courtney. "You made me raise his son," he said. His voice was hollow. "You let me love him. You let me think he was part of me." Courtney was sobbing now. Ugly, real tears. "I did it for us, Kendrick. We needed the heir. We needed to secure the inheritance. Atticus would never have given us the company without a grandson." Kendrick laughed. It was a sound of pure madness. "You did not do it for us," he said. "You did it for the money." He took off the Rolex watch. He threw it at her. It hit her in the chest and fell to the floor. "Keep it," he said. "It is fake, just like you." He walked over to me. He looked broken. He looked old. "I am sorry, Dad," he said. I looked at him. "I know," I said. "But sorry does not fix the company, Kendrick. Sorry does not fix the fact that you let these parasites into our home." I turned to the board members. I cleared my throat. "The show is over," I said. "But the meeting is just beginning." I motioned to Lydia. "Read the new will," I said. Lydia stepped forward. She opened her briefcase. Grant tried to sneak toward the door. "Sit down, Grant," I barked. "The police are waiting outside. You are not going anywhere until I say so." Grant froze. He sat down on the floor amidst the broken glass. I looked at the screen one last time. I turned off the projector. The white light faded. The room returned to normal. But nothing would ever be normal again. I sat back in my chair. I adjusted my cuffs. Now I said, "Let us talk about who really owns Mercer Haulage." The paper lay on the wet carpet like a dead leaf. It was just a standard sheet of white printer paper, but it carried the weight of a tombstone. Kendrick stood over it. His chest was heaving. His eyes were wide and unseeing. He looked like a man who had just watched his own house burn down with everything he loved inside it. The silence in the boardroom was heavy. It was a physical pressure that pressed against our eardrums. The air conditioning hummed, but it sounded distant. The board members were frozen in their seats. The influencers had lowered their phones. Nobody dared to breathe. Nobody dared to move. They were witnessing a tragedy so raw and so violent that it felt almost holy. I sat at the head of the table. I did not move. I did not look away. I was the judge and the jury, and I had delivered the verdict. But the sentence had not yet been fully executed. Kendrick looked up at me. His face was gray. The sweat was running down his temples, mixing with the tears on his cheeks. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was broken. It was the voice of a child waking up from a nightmare. "Dad, say something. Tell me I am reading it wrong. Tell me this is just another test." I looked at my son. I felt a deep ache in my chest. It was the ancient pain of a father seeing his child suffer. But I could not take it away. I could not fix this. To fix a bone, you have to break it first. To fix a life, you have to destroy the lie that is holding it together. "Pick it up, Kendrick," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a general giving an order on a battlefield. It cut through the silence like a knife. Kendrick shook his head. "I cannot," he said. "I cannot look at it again." "Pick it up," I repeated. "Read it. Read it out loud so everyone can hear. Read it so your wife can hear. Read it so your best friend can hear." Kendrick bent down. His movements were jerky and uncoordinated. He snatched the wet paper from the floor. He held it up. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. He looked at Courtney. She was standing by the window. Her face was buried in her hands. She was not looking at him. She was hiding. "He cannot do it," I said. I stood up. I walked over to my son. I took the paper from his trembling hands. I turned to the room. I held the paper up. "This is a DNA test from the Genetic Identity Laboratory of Atlanta," I announced. My voice boomed off the glass walls. "It is a certified legal document. There are no deepfakes here. There are no tricks. There is only science." I looked at the board of directors. "You wanted to know about the future of this company," I said. "You wanted to know about the legacy of the Mercer family." I looked down at the paper. Item 1. Alleged father Kendrick Mercer. Child Leo Mercer. I paused. I let the names hang in the air. Probability of paternity, I read. I looked at Kendrick. 0%. I said the number clearly. I enunciated every syllable. 0, not 1%. Not a margin of error. 0. Kendrick let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. I continued reading. The genetic markers do not match at any loci. The alleged father is excluded from all biological relationship to the child. I lowered the paper. I looked at Courtney. She had lowered her hands. Her makeup was ruined. Her eyes were wild. "He is not a Mercer," I said to her. "You brought a stranger into my house. You gave him my name. You gave him my love. And you gave him my inheritance." Courtney stepped forward. She looked desperate. She looked like a drowning woman trying to climb onto a sinking ship. "Atticus, please," she begged. "It does not matter. Love makes a family. Kendrick loves him. You love him. Isn't that enough?" I looked at her with ice in my veins. "Truth makes a family. Courtney," I said, "lies make a conspiracy." I walked back to the head of the table. I picked up the second yellow envelope, the one I had not given to Kendrick yet. "But there is more," I said. Grant tried to stand up. I saw him tensing his muscles. He was looking at the door. He was calculating the distance. "Sit down, Grant," I barked. He froze. He sat back down. When I found out that Kendrick was not the father, I had a question, I said. I tapped the envelope against the table. "If he is not the father, then who is? Who is the man that my daughter-in-law was meeting in secret? Who is the man that my grandson looks like more and more every day?" I opened the envelope. I pulled out the second report. "I hired a private investigator," I said. "I followed you, Grant. I followed you to the tennis courts. I followed you to the parking garage. And I picked up the coffee cup you threw in the trash." Grant's face went white. He looked like he was going to be sick. "I compared your DNA to Leo's DNA," I said. I held up the paper. "Item 2, alleged father Grant Anderson, child Leo Mercer." I looked at Grant. "Probability of paternity 99.99%. The room erupted. The board members gasped. Someone knocked over a glass of water. The sound of shattering glass was sharp and sudden. "He is yours," I said, pointing my finger at Grant. It was an accusation. It was a verdict. It was a weapon. "You are the father," I said. You knew it. Courtney knew it. You conspired to pass your child off as my heir so you could steal my company." Grant stood up. He held up his hands. "Now wait a minute," he stammered. "I didn't know for sure. Courtney told me it was possible, but we never did a test. I am a victim here too." "Liar," Kendrick screamed. It happened so fast nobody could stop it. Kendrick lunged across the space between them. He did not look like my son anymore. He looked like a wild animal. He collided with Grant and they both crashed into the side of the boardroom table. Chairs flew backward. The crystal pitcher fell and smashed. Kendrick was on top of him. He was punching Grant in the face, over and over again. There was no technique. There was only rage. "You knew," Kendrick screamed. Each word was punctuated by a blow. "You ate at my table. You played with him. You let me call him son." Grant tried to defend himself, but he was overwhelmed. He covered his face with his arms. Blood splattered onto his white linen suit. It sprayed onto the polished wood of the floor. Courtney screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek that hurt the ears. "Stop him," she yelled. "Somebody stop him. He is going to kill him." She looked at the board members. "Help him," she pleaded. Nobody moved. The men in the expensive suits watched with morbid fascination. They were seeing the raw, primal violence that hides beneath the surface of civilization. They were seeing justice in its most primitive form. She looked at me. "Atticus," she screamed. "Do something. Stop your son." I sat in my chair. I folded my hands. I watched. I did not blink. I did not flinch. "This is not my son," I said calmly. "My son died 5 years ago when he married you. The man you see there is just the consequences of your actions coming home to roost." Kendrick grabbed Grant by the throat. He squeezed. Grant's eyes bulged. He gagged. He clawed at Kendrick's hands. "Tell me the truth," Kendrick roared. "Tell me you planned it." Grant nodded frantically. His face was turning purple. Kendrick let go. He stood up. He looked down at the man who had been his friend, the man who had stolen his life. He spat on him. It was a gesture of pure contempt. Kendrick turned around. He was panting. His knuckles were bleeding. His shirt was torn. He looked wild. He looked at Courtney. She was backed against the wall. She was shaking. She looked at Kendrick with terror. She had never seen him like this. She had only known the weak, pliable Kendrick. She did not know that even a sheep will bite if you back it into a corner long enough. Kendrick walked toward her. Courtney raised her hands. Kendrick, baby, please, don't call me that, he said. His voice was low and dangerous. I did it for us, she cried. Her lies were automatic now, a reflex. I wanted us to have the money. I wanted us to be happy. You wanted you to be happy, Kendrick said. He stopped in front of her. He looked at her gold dress. The dress she had bought to celebrate her victory. It was shimmering under the lights. You are fired, he said. What, she whispered. You are fired from this family, Kendrick said. You are fired from my life. Get out. Courtney looked at him. She looked at the room full of people. She realized she had lost the audience. She realized she had lost the narrative. She looked at me. Atticus, she said. Her voice changed. It became the voice of the victim. You cannot let him throw me out. I have rights. I am the mother of your grandson. I stood up slowly. I walked over to where she stood. I looked down at her. I have no grandson, I said. The words hung in the air. They were heavy. They were final. But Leo, she stammered. You love Leo. You played catch with him yesterday. You cannot just turn off your feelings. I looked at Grant, who was trying to crawl up from the floor. That man is his father, I said, pointing to Grant. Let him play catch. Let him pay for the private school. Let him buy the toys. I turned back to Courtney. You thought you could trick nature, I said. You thought you could trick me. But you forgot one thing, Courtney. What she breathed. You forgot that I spent 40 years moving cargo, I said. I know how to spot a counterfeit manifest, and I know how to reject a damaged shipment. I pointed to the door. Lydia, unlock the door, I said. Lydia Stone walked to the door. She turned the lock. The click was loud in the silent room. Get out, I said. Take your lover, take your lies, and get out of my building. Courtney looked at Kendrick. He had turned his back on her. He was staring out the window at the city skyline. She looked at the board members. They were looking at the floor. She realized it was over, truly over. She walked to the door. She tried to hold her head high, but her shoulders were shaking. Grant stumbled after her, holding a handkerchief to his bloody nose. He did not look at anyone. He looked like a beaten dog. They walked out into the hallway. I watched them go. When the door closed, the room let out a collective sigh. The tension broke. I looked at Kendrick. He was still staring out the window. His shoulders were heaving. He was crying silently. I walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched. It is okay, son, I said softly. He turned to me. His eyes were red and swollen. It is not okay, Dad, he said. My life is gone. My wife is a whore. My son is a stranger. I have nothing. I looked at him. I squeezed his shoulder. You have the truth, Kendrick, I said. It hurts, I know. It feels like you are dying. But you are not dying. You are just waking up. I turned to the board of directors. They were watching us. They were waiting to see what would happen next. They were wondering if the company would survive this. They were wondering if the stock would plummet. I walked back to the head of the table. I sat down. I adjusted my cuffs. I smoothed my tie. I picked up the cane and set it aside. I did not need it anymore. The act was over. I looked at the board members one by one. I let them see the steel in my eyes. I let them see the man who had built this empire. I am sorry you had to witness that, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of authority. But it was necessary. I picked up the transfer documents that Courtney had placed on the table earlier, the papers that would have given her everything. I held them up. I ripped them in half. The sound of tearing paper was loud and satisfying. I ripped them again and again, until they were just confetti. I let the pieces fall onto the table. There will be no transfer of power today, I announced. I looked at Kendrick. My son has some things to learn, I said. He has some growing up to do. He has to find himself again. Kendrick looked at me. He nodded slowly. He understood. And until he does, I continued, I will remain as CEO of Mercer Hollage. I looked at the influencers standing in the corner. You can put your phones away, I said. The show is over. Or better yet, post it. Let the world know that at Mercer Hollage we do not tolerate fraud. I turned to Lydia. Lydia, I said. Yes, Atticus, she said. Prepare the eviction notices, I said, and call the police. I want to file charges for embezzlement and fraud against Courtney Mercer and Grant Anderson. I looked at the yellow envelope still sitting on the table. The DNA test. The weapon that had saved us. I picked it up. And Lydia, I said. Yes, call the security team. I want the locks changed on the estate. Tonight. I looked at Kendrick. Come on, son, I said. Let us go home. We have a lot of work to do. Kendrick wiped his face. He straightened his torn shirt. He walked over to me. He looked broken, but he was standing. We walked out of the boardroom together. We left the broken glass and the broken dreams behind us. We walked into the hallway. The elevator doors opened. We stepped inside. As the doors closed, I looked at my reflection in the metal panel. I looked old. I looked tired. But I looked clean. The cancer had been cut out. The wound would bleed for a while, but we would survive. We were Mercers, and Mercers always deliver the goods, no matter how heavy the load. The elevator doors opened into the lobby of the Mercer building. It was a cavernous space with marble floors and high glass walls that looked out onto the rainy streets of Atlanta. Security had stopped Courtney and Grant near the revolving doors. They looked like refugees from a failed coup. Courtney was hugging her arms, trying to cover the stain on her gold dress where the wine had spilled. Grant was holding a tissue to his nose, which was swelling rapidly. They looked small against the backdrop of the corporate logos and the security guards who stood with their arms crossed. I walked toward them with Lydia Stone by my side. The sound of my cane tapping against the marble echoed through the space. It was the only sound in the lobby. The receptionist had stopped typing. The courier waiting for a package was staring. Everyone knew something was happening. Courtney saw me coming. She straightened her spine. She tried to summon the arrogance that had carried her through the last 5 years, but her tank was empty. "Let us go, Atticus," she said, her voice shrill and echoing. "You have humiliated us enough. We are leaving." I stopped 10 feet away from them. I planted my cane on the floor. "You are free to leave the building, Courtney," I said, "but you cannot leave your obligations." Lydia stepped forward. She was holding a thick black binder. It was not the yellow envelope of family destruction. It was the black binder of financial ruin. She opened it with a snap. Mrs. Mercer Lydia began using the name with precise mockery. "Before you exit the premises, we need to review the terms of your departure. You seem to be under the impression that you are simply walking away from a marriage. You are mistaken. You are walking away from a crime scene." Courtney laughed nervously. "A crime scene," she scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. I spent some money on company cards. I was the wife of the CEO. I had authorization." Lydia pulled a document from the binder. She held it up. It was an invoice. "This is an invoice for a week-long stay at the Four Seasons in Maui." Lydia read, "It is dated last month. You listed it as a corporate strategy retreat. However, the flight manifest shows only 2 passengers, you and Grant Anderson." Lydia pulled out another paper. "This is a receipt for a diamond necklace from Tiffany & Company valued at $12,000. You listed it as office supplies." Lydia flipped the page. "And this," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "this is the wire transfer of $50,000 to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. A company that we have traced back to an account in your maiden name." Courtney's face went white. "That was for consulting," she stammered. "I was setting up the beauty brand." "That is embezzlement," Lydia said. "It is wire fraud. It is tax evasion. And since you use the United States Postal Service to mail the checks, it is also mail fraud. These are federal crimes, Courtney. The FBI does not care about your beauty brand. They care about the $500,000 you have siphoned out of Mercer Haulage in the last 18 months. $500,000, Grant whispered. He looked at Courtney with horror. "You told me you only took 50. Courtney glared at him. "Shut up, Grant." Lydia turned her gaze to Grant. She looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "do not think you are a spectator. You are a co-conspirator. You accepted funds that you knew were stolen. You accompanied Mrs. Mercer on trips paid for by stolen money. You drove a car leased with stolen money." Grant shook his head frantically. "I didn't know," he pleaded. "She told me it was her allowance. She told me Atticus gave her the money." "Ignorance is not a defense when you are spending 6 figures, Lydia said coldly. "But that is a matter for the criminal courts. We are here to talk about the civil restitution." "Civil restitution?" Courtney asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Lydia handed Courtney a sheet of paper. It was a balance sheet. The numbers were printed in bold red ink. "According to the corporate bylaws of Mercer Haulage," Lydia explained, "any officer or dependent who misuses company funds is personally liable for the repayment of those funds plus interest and legal fees. We have invoked the Iron Hand Clause of the executive contract." Iron Hand, Courtney repeated. It means, Lydia said, enjoying every syllable, that we have successfully petitioned the court to freeze your personal assets effective immediately. Your bank accounts are locked, your credit cards are canceled. That Range Rover in the parking lot has already been reported as stolen property since the lease payments were made with embezzled funds. Courtney looked at her purse. She pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen frantically. "My cards," she whispered. "They are declined, all of them." Lydia nodded, but we did not stop there. "You see, Atticus is a very thorough man. When he realized what you were doing, he did not just look at the company books, he looked at your personal debts." Lydia turned a page in the binder. "You have 3 maxed-out credit cards with a total debt of $80,000. You have a personal loan from a predatory lender for another $40,000. And you have unpaid taxes from your previous failed business ventures." "So what?" Courtney spat. "Lots of people have debt. I will declare bankruptcy." "You cannot declare bankruptcy on fraud," Lydia corrected her. "But here is the interesting part." Lydia pointed to me. I stepped forward. "I bought your debt, Courtney," I said. She looked at me confused. "What?" "I contacted your creditors," I said. "I contacted the banks. I contacted the loan sharks. I offered to buy your debt for pennies on the dollar. They were happy to sell. They knew you were a risk." I leaned in close. "I am your creditor now, Courtney. I own your Visa bill. I own your car note. I own the loan you took out to buy those fake implants. I own every single dollar you owe to the world." Courtney stepped back. She looked like she was going to faint. "And I am calling in the loan," I said. "Today, right now." I looked at Grant. "And you?" "Grant," I said, "you think you are safe because you are just the tennis coach." Grant swallowed hard. "I don't owe you anything, old man." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Do you know a man named Russo?" I asked. "A bookie in underground Atlanta. Big guy. Likes to break fingers." Grant's eyes almost popped out of his head. "How do you know Russo?" "I bought his book," I said. "Well, I bought your page of his book. I paid him the $50,000 you owe him for your gambling losses." Russo was very grateful. He said you were a bad investment. I pulled a promissory note from my pocket. "You owe me $50,000, Grant," I said, "plus interest. And since I am not as nice as Russo, I am not going to break your fingers. I am going to garnish your wages for the rest of your life. If you ever get a job again, every paycheck will come to me first." Grant slumped against the wall. He slid down until he was sitting on the cold marble floor. He put his head in his hands. Courtney looked at him, then she looked at me. The reality was setting in. She was not just poor, she was destitute. She was drowning in a sea of red ink, and I was the ocean. "You cannot do this," she whispered. "I am the mother of your—" She stopped. She remembered. She had no leverage. "I am a human being," she finished weakly. I looked at her. I looked at the gold dress that cost $5,000 of my money. I looked at the diamond earrings that belonged to the company. "You are a thief," I said, "and thieves pay a price." Lydia closed the black binder. The sound was like a gavel coming down. "The police are 5 minutes away," Lydia said, checking her watch. "We have prepared a full dossier for the district attorney. We have the videos, we have the financial records, we have the DNA tests proving the paternity fraud, which establishes the motive for the theft." Courtney looked at the revolving doors. She looked at the street. "I am going to run," she said. Her eyes were wild. "Go ahead," I said. "Run. But you have no car. You have no money. Your credit cards are useless. You cannot even call an Uber. Where will you go, Courtney? Who will take you in?" She looked around the lobby. She saw the security guards blocking the exits. She saw the receptionist watching her. She saw the world closing in. She fell to her knees. It was not a graceful fall, it was a collapse. The gold sequins scraped against the marble. She grabbed the hem of my trousers. "Atticus, please," she sobbed. "I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. I will leave town. Just do not send me to prison. I cannot go to prison. I am too pretty for prison." I looked down at her. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just the cold satisfaction of a job finished. "You should have thought about that before you threw my wife's clothes in the trash," I said. I pulled my leg away from her grasp. I brushed the dust from my trousers. I turned to the security guard. "Hold them until the police arrive," I ordered. "If they try to leave, use force." "Yes, Mr. Mercer," the guard said, stepping forward. I looked at Lydia. "Are we done here?" I asked. Lydia smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, a smile of victory. "We are done, Atticus," she said. "The iron hand has closed." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the elevator. I did not look back at the woman sobbing on the floor in her ruined gold dress. I did not look back at the man bleeding on the marble. I heard the sirens in the distance. They were getting louder. They were coming for the trash. I pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors opened. I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I heard Courtney scream one last time. It was a scream of pure despair. It was the sound of a parasite realizing the host had fought back. The elevator rose. I watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3. I was ascending. They were descending. The balance sheet was corrected. The debt was collected. And I, Atticus Mercer, was finally free. The rain had stopped, but the asphalt of the parking lot was still black and slick. I stood next to my sedan, watching the police cruiser fade into the distance, carrying Courtney away. Kendrick stood beside me. He was shivering. He had lost his wife, he had lost his son, and he had lost his dignity. He looked at me with the eyes of a beaten dog waiting for a pat on the head. He was waiting for me to tell him it was going to be okay. He was waiting for me to open my wallet and fix his broken life like I had done 1,000 times before. But the bank of Atticus Mercer was closed. Kendrick wiped his nose with his sleeve. "So what happens now, Dad?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Do I come back to the office tomorrow? Do we start rebranding?" I looked at him. I looked at the man I had raised. He was soft, he was weak, and his weakness had almost cost me my empire. "No," I said. "You do not come to the office. The office is for executives. You are not an executive, Kendrick. You are a liability." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a set of keys. They were not the keys to a Mercedes. They were heavy brass keys on a wire ring. They smelled of grease and diesel. I tossed them to him. He caught them clumsily. "What are these?" he asked, looking down at the keys. "That is the key to truck number 404, I said. "It is an old Freightliner. No air conditioning. Manual transmission. The suspension is shot. We call it the Mule." Kendrick looked at me confused. "I don't understand." "You owe the company money, Kendrick," I said, my voice hard as granite. "You signed off on Courtney's expenses. You were negligent. The audit is going to cost thousands. The legal fees are going to cost thousands. You are in debt, son." I pointed to the far end of the lot where the trucks were parked. "You start tomorrow morning at 4 a.m., I said. "You are going to drive the Mule. You are going to haul lumber to Savannah and back. And you are going to keep driving until you have paid back every single cent your wife stole from me." "But Dad," Kendrick stammered, "I am the vice president. I cannot be a truck driver." "You are not the vice president," I cut him off. "You are an employee on probation. And if you are late one time, if you miss one shift, I will fire you. And then you really will be on the street. Go earn money to pay for your stupidity." Kendrick stared at the keys. He looked at his soft hands. Then he nodded. He knew I meant it. He turned and walked toward the truck. His shoulders slumped. He looked small. He looked alone. Good. A man needs to be alone to find his backbone. Then came the hardest part. A black sedan pulled up. It was the social worker. Grant had been arrested and Courtney was in custody. Leo had nowhere to go. The state had to take him until the paternity and custody could be sorted out. The social worker opened the back door. Leo was sitting in his car seat. He was holding a toy truck I had given him for Christmas. He saw me. His face lit up. "Grandpa," he called out. "Grandpa, are we going home?" I felt a knife twist in my gut. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to grab him and take him back to the estate. I wanted to tell him that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. He was not a Mercer. He was the son of a thief and a con artist. Every time I looked at him, I would see Grant's face. Every time I looked at him, I would remember the betrayal. I could not build a future on a foundation of pain. I walked over to the car. I looked at the boy. He had big brown eyes, innocent eyes. Grandpa Leo said, reaching out his little hand, "Up, pick me up." I put my hands in my pockets. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. "Goodbye, Leo," I said. My voice was flat. I did not let it waver. He looked confused. "Where are you going, Grandpa?" "I am going back to work," I said. I turned my back on him. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It was harder than war. It was harder than burying my wife. I heard him start to cry as the car door closed. I heard him calling my name through the glass. "Grandpa, Grandpa." I did not turn around. I stared straight ahead at the gray horizon. "I am not your grandpa," I whispered to the wind. The car drove away. I listened until the sound of the engine disappeared. I was alone in the parking lot. It was quiet. I had cut out the cancer, but I had left a piece of my heart on the operating table. I walked to my car. I did not look back. Mercers do not look back. We only look forward, even when the road ahead is empty and cold. 6 months have passed since the storm broke over the Mercer estate. The seasons have changed in Atlanta. The humid, suffocating heat of summer has given way to the crisp, clear air of autumn. The leaves on the oak trees lining my driveway have turned the color of old gold and dried tobacco. I stood on the front porch watching the sun go down. The lawn was manicured. The hedges were trimmed. The white vans of the party planners and the delivery trucks of the social climbers were gone. The driveway was empty except for my sedan and the ghost of the chaos that used to live here. I walked inside. The house was quiet. It was not the empty silence of abandonment. It was the heavy, peaceful silence of a library or a cathedral. It was the sound of order being restored. I went into the dining room. The long mahogany table was polished to a mirror shine. There were no sticky juice stains. There were no plastic toys scattered on the Persian rug. There were no fashion magazines piled on the chairs. There was just one place setting at the head of the table. I sat down. The chair creaked familiarly under my weight. I poured myself a glass of wine. It was a vintage Bordeaux. The same year I started the company. It was deep and red and complex. To my right, I had placed a framed photograph of Camille. It was taken on our 40th anniversary. She was wearing blue. She was smiling that secret smile she saved just for me. I looked at her. "We did it, Camille," I whispered. "The house is clean." The maid brought out my dinner. Roast chicken and collard greens. Simple food. Soul food. It tasted better than any catered canapé I had eaten in the last 5 years. I ate slowly. I savored every bite. I thought about Kendrick. He was somewhere on Interstate 95 tonight. He called me yesterday from a truck stop in South Carolina. He did not ask for money. He did not ask to come home. He told me that his back hurt and that he had blown a tire near Savannah. He told me he changed it himself in the rain. He sounded tired, but for the first time in his life, he sounded like a man. He sounded like a Mercer. He is paying his debt. It will take him 10 years, but when he walks back through that front door, he will have earned the right to sit at this table. I thought about Leo. I would be lying if I said I did not miss the sound of his laughter. Sometimes late at night I think I hear the patter of small feet in the hallway. My heart jumps for a second. But then I remember the DNA test. I remember the tennis coach. I remember the lie that sat at this table and ate my food. And the silence becomes a comfort again. I miss the boy, but I do not miss the deception. You cannot build a legacy on a fraud. You cannot love a mirage. I raised my glass to the empty room. The company posted its highest quarterly profit in a decade. Mrs. Higgins is back at the front desk. The trucks are running on time. The pink vinyl has been scraped off and the Mercer blue paint shines in the sun. I am alone in this big house. Some people would call it a tragedy. They would say an old man needs family around him. They would say I was too harsh, too cruel. Let them talk. I have my dignity. I have my empire. And I have the peace of mind that comes from knowing exactly who I am and exactly who is standing beside me, even if they are only in a photograph. I looked at Camille one last time. "The truth is expensive, my love," I said. "It cost us a son. It cost us a grandson. It cost us a lot of heartache." I took a sip of the wine. It was rich and bold, but it was worth every penny. I finished my dinner in silence. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked steadily. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It was the heartbeat of a house that had survived the fire. I am Atticus Mercer, and I am still the captain of this ship. The storm is over, the course is set, and for the first time in a long time the water is calm. I learned that family is not defined by the blood running through your veins, but by the loyalty running through your actions. For years I tried to buy peace with silence, but I realized that peace bought with lies is just a lease that eventually expires. You cannot save people from their own weakness, and you cannot build a legacy on a foundation of deceit. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people hit rock bottom so they can find their own way up. The truth is a heavy burden to carry, but it is the only weight worth lifting. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think I was too harsh on my son by making him drive a truck, or was it the only way to save him? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that justice should always be served cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the edge of the empire. See you on the next haul.